Members of the public, welcome to our November Council meeting. I'm Lorraine Young, I'm the Mayor, and I'll be presiding this evening. I'll just mention at the moment we're being joined by Councillor Michael Thomas remotely. Councillor Thomas, can you hear? Yeah. Thank you. And we'll come to your declaration at the appropriate point. I would like to remind members of the public that this meeting is being recorded. It will be live video streamed, so if you're at the meeting, you may be captured on that live recording, and that will be on the town's website. I do want to start by acknowledging the Whadjuk Noongar people, the traditional custodians of the land where we're meeting this evening, and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I'll draw attention to the rules of procedure which govern this meeting, which are available on the town's website, in particular public question time, 15 minutes. Each person speaking, asking questions will have 3 minutes, and likewise with public statement time. So I am going to go to public questions. I'll ask, I think most people know the procedure. If you come to the microphone, state your name and address and put your questions. And I'll start with Stephen Mellor, please.
Good evening, councillors, members of the public, administration. I'm Stephen Mellor of Graham Court, Cottesloe. My questions are various. With regard to the Cottesloe Village Precinct Plan and the Station Street application, what is the reason for the delay in presenting the village plan to council? Once again, embarrassingly, the town is behind developers' applications, just as they were for the Marine Parade developments, i.e. the cash in lieu of parking or public art, missed opportunities. If the village plan is to be presented to council in December, when will the subsequent community consultation likely start and for what period? I'm particularly concerned about summer school holiday absent residents. Is 10 stories the anticipated height for the Station Street 7 and 11 location in the draft stage of the village plan? What is the rationale for the council to have agreed with the DPLH, as I understand it, to leave the 2022 number 12 local planning amendment on hold? And also, please note the Albion Hotel is state rather than local heritage listed on page 22 of the agenda. Read the Indiana. How many discussions, meetings or negotiations have there been since the June 2024 OCM between the council and 5/8 on the Indiana proposal? Has 5/8 made any decisions on their development plans for the remaining lease term? Have the parameters been accepted by 5/8 in continuing in development considerations? And is the town satisfied that the enforced maintenance requirements have been met? Has council any plans to improve the Indiana public toilets area, surely a required maintenance, as I believe this is responsibility of council? How many elected members' workshops and specialist presentations have been held since the October 23 elections? What were the subject matters of those workshops? My last question. In tonight's Record Policy Officer report, it is stated that policies require the town branding. Is it not equally necessary for council strategies to also be such branding requirements? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mellor. I think we'll take those on notice because they are quite wide-ranging. I just wonder, you asked a question about the rationale for leaving 2022 on the table. Could you elaborate on that, please? You're still in time.
I can elaborate as much as I've heard from the department. That's the agreed between the council and I presume the department built up the APC, and it will be on hold.
But I don't understand what you're referring to.
The amendment for Station Street,
The scheme amendment.
the local government planning, 12 I think it is.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah. We'll be able to provide a full answer on that. We will be able to provide a full answer on that, but we'll take it on notice.
The question tonight, if Station Street comes up, you could confirm about the number of stories that is in the village plan.
The village plan hasn't been considered by council yet, so councillors haven't actually seen the final version, or have we? We probably have in the what was the?
That's Thursday night, the steering committee.
Yeah. So councillors haven't seen the.
You couldn't just confirm the number of stories.
Well, I can't because I haven't seen it. So.
I can't believe you haven't seen that.
Well, I'm certainly not telling a lie, Mr Mellor. I haven't seen it. So I'm not on this.
You've seen earlier drafts.
Sorry?
You've probably seen earlier drafts.
Well, you can speculate as you will. I haven't seen it. And I'm not on the steering group. So, and I assure you I don't lie. Thank you. Mr Mellor, and you'll be submitting the questions. Thank you. Mr Morgan, Kevin Morgan.
Thank you. I'm asking my questions on 10.2.1, the golf club committee that you've got. I'm not asking on behalf of the golf club. I only just found out that someone else from the golf club's here, but it's not me. My questions. Is council keeping confidential any documents that were tabled or presented at the 8 October meeting of its Seaview Golf Club Redevelopment Advisory Committee? 2, is council in breach of the law for not having published with the meeting's agenda all of the documents to be tabled or presented at the 8 October meeting? 3, given that the law only allows documents to be kept confidential for a meeting likely to be closed under section 5232 of the Act, how could that ever have been likely, given that this provision is only for a committee to which council has delegated its authority?
I'm just going to pick you up there, Mr Morgan. There was no delegated authority to that committee at all.
That's right.
No,
that's right. So, sorry, can I get my time stopped?
I'm actually going to eat into a little bit of your time to ask you to stop making allegations.
Sorry,
excuse me, Mr Morgan.
Excuse me, you didn't let me finish the question.
Mr Morgan, are you aware of the provisions of the standing orders that say when the presiding member is speaking, all people in the meeting will be quiet? And that includes you. I'm asking you to refrain from making allegations that council is behaving illegally.
What was my allegation? You said that the committee doesn't have any authority. That's what I agree.
Thank
I
you.
agree.
Thank you, Mr Morgan.
That's what I was about to say.
Mr Morgan,
Okay.
Continue on.
My third question. Given that the law only allows documents to be kept confidential for a meeting likely to be closed under section 5232 of the Act, how could that ever have been likely, given that this provision is only for a committee to which council has delegated its authority, and this committee's terms of reference state that it has no delegated authority, which I agree. Did elected members of the committee try to gag golf club members by a purported resolution?
I'm going to pull you up there, Mr Morgan. Please, can you behave respectfully in the meeting, please?
Did elected members of the committee try to stop golf club members disclosing anything by a purported resolution under this provision, even though it gives them no power to do so, given that this committee has no delegated authority? Fifth, the 8 October meeting was already a closed meeting, so does this mean the only possible effect of the Mayor's motion was to stop disclosure of documents provided to the meeting and as to what was said at the meeting? 6, what particular words in what documents were sought to be kept confidential by the Mayor's motion? 7, rather than keep a whole document confidential, could the motion instead just redact particular confidential information? 8, will council notify committee members they are free to disclose whatever was tabled, presented or discussed at its meetings? 9, Will Council now ensure all documents tabled or presented at a meeting of the committee are published on its website? 10. Is Council in breach of the law by not publishing unconfirmed minutes of the 8 October meeting within 7 days, that is, by 15 October? 11. Why were unconfirmed minutes of the 8 October committee meeting not received at the Council's 22 October meeting when it dealt with material already considered at the 8 October meeting, but which instead are being received at tonight's meeting? Why is Council proposing to this month again adopt recommendation 6 of those unconfirmed minutes, even though last month it already adopted that recommendation? And 13, is the committee invalidly constituted because its terms of reference bind members to non-existent legislation and because it requires members to vote? But this cannot be required of a committee which has no delegated authority. And I have copies cross-referenced to the legislation so no one gets offended. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Morgan. And we'll take those questions on notice. Thank you, thank you. Yvonne Hart, Mrs Hart.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have some questions which possibly have been circulated. But my first question relates to agenda item, the monthly financial statements. I'm asking, could you please investigate the font being used for the monthly financial statements? Because the font that is currently being used, it's difficult to read. And the blue font being used for headings is too pale, and a standard font and darker blue headings would be more user-friendly for people like me that like reading monthly financial statements. A couple more questions. They relate to the green infrastructure strategy. There are several questions there, but I'm so impressed with the reports. They're actually overwhelming, and so my questions relate mostly to financial matters. And so you can read them, but what would be the cost of employing a bush care officer for the green infrastructure strategy? Given that the town of Cottesloe already has 26 vehicles for staff, would there be an extra cost with another vehicle? What was the full cost of the National Natural Area Management Plan? So my questions are along those lines, because I'm so impressed with those documents, and the questions are just, what's the cost of all of this? And another section that you probably already have got a copy of, it's the Healthy Streets project. The detailed information is incredible. But what was paid to the Healthy Street consultant for the preliminary report, there's 54 pages of it. Given that the capital cost of the Healthy Street project looks to be $1 million or more for 2 streets, and there are ongoing costs associated with that, what will the cost to ratepayers be for the drainage, for the street lighting, deflecting the road treatment, the cost of raised pavement? They're not in this report. There are additional costs. And so my questions relate to that, the ongoing asset management. And so my question to you is, could this Healthy Street project be reconsidered, given that Cottesloe, we've only got 47 kilometres of road, and the cost of this is likely to be eye-watering to ratepayers. So I'm asking you, could you reconsider this project? It just seems to be overwhelmingly costly for our ratepayers. And that really is my question.
Thank you, Mrs Hart. We'll take them on notice because
Yes,
most
you.
of them are detailed about the finances. I will just mention that the Healthy Streets work is not going to be at the expense of the town of Cottesloe. This is a project that is run by Main Roads,
Yep.
I understand. Is it Main?
Yep.
And the agreement is that the town would pay for the initial consultation, and we'll pay for the monitoring of the effectiveness of the steps that are implemented. Everything else is expected to be met by the state government through Main Roads.
I think that's the point of my
Yeah,
questions.
thank you.
And I have a statement to make. Can I make my statement now?
Yes, well, that's all the public questions dealt with, so yeah, we can move on. Mrs Hart, you can do yours. Go ahead.
Should I make my statement?
Yes, please.
It relates to the Station Street, and I really would like to offer my thanks and congratulations to Ed Druitt, who's been identified as the author of that agenda item on Station Street. The report is so comprehensive. It goes into so much detail. 10 years of detail. He's had to travel through research. I was part of the 2014 and 2017 discussions. At that time, Station Street, we agreed, would be 3 to 5 stories high. Ed has gone through with staff and brought us up to date with that project for the last 10 years. And I really think he and the staff need to be congratulated and thanked from all of us for giving such an amazing and comprehensive report of Station Street over the last 10 years. So a big shout out to Ed and the staff.
Thank you very much, Mrs Hart. I'm sure that the CEO will relay that, and we'll tell Mr Druitt to watch the video recording tomorrow on the town's website. Thanks very much. When it goes on the town's website. Thank you. Mr Phil Patterson.
Thank you, Mayor, councillors, staff and anyone else listening outside. I wish to speak basically in support of the council's approach to the Station Street application. Your words are you do not uphold. I wish to lodge my objection to the thing that's been lodged, which I've also done with the WAPC. So looking at it as an overall planning issue, and I think this is a really important thing. The first thing, I just want to back Yvonne's comments about thanking the Mayor and the councillors and the staff for the quality of the research you have produced. We're a very small council. Councillors are volunteers. The enormous amounts of time which the public will not even be aware of that you contribute is very, very much appreciated. And we're up against some rather big foes. Anyway, in terms of the actual details, so much has been lodged in terms of the content. I just want to particularly just briefly mention the thought of 15 and 17 stories suddenly appearing when there were 10, and the massive impact of shadow on Napoleon Street, which I frequent often, is a major issue. The transport issues, among which we've yet to see how it's resolved, I think will be quite a challenge. And the main thing is proper planning principles should apply, and this applies at the local government level and also obviously when we get to the WA Planning Commission. The second thing I want to do, just the background for this, I'm fascinated by the continuing use of COVID-19 things under the Part 17 pathway, which came in around 2020 with the aim of encouraging development and was removed in December 2023. This loophole appears to have been used by the applicants for Station Street. And I just want to point out that basically using the colloquial term, the pub test, we don't get near it. We're in Western Australia now, where the Premier is offering $10,000 per person incentives to get tradespeople here from other states and from New Zealand as of the weekend to do. So we have a massive shortfall of trades. I read in the Sunday Times 120,000 extra traders will be needed in the next decade just to meet the current demand. So to have a project like this come in with increased number of stories pretending to be under COVID, there are many words I'd use, I'll keep to pub test, but it is not credible for the planning system. And I just want to make that point there. The third thing then, I'd just like to address the members of the WA Planning Commission. The Minister on, I think, June the 7th announced a new board structure with a reduced number of people on it, and the qualifications look fine to me, I don't know any of them. But the aim was to aim for more strategic planning. So basically, if they keep to that aim, then basically we should have a chance to discuss. The final point I would like to make, if I can have another 30 seconds, This council, I've been to many meetings in the last 3 years. The level of calibre seriously around the table now, the strategic planning both on the Cottesloe Precinct Village thing and the local plan update is incredibly good. If the fact that we're running basically maybe a month or two late meeting these requirements with all the pressures that staff and councillors are under, with 300-page documents at this stage, should not be used as an excuse for the WAPC to wave through the applicant, because they have conditions allowed to do updates at any time under the Path 17 pathway. Thank you for your time and all the best.
Thank you, Mr Patterson. Kevin Morgan.
This is on items 10.1.5 and 10.2.1. My earlier questions were not for the responses, but rather to highlight the uncertainty is a pitfall of secrecy. Another is that it denies you the benefit of guardrails against mistakes in your decision making that otherwise comes from exposing the information you receive to public scrutiny. Secrecy gets things done, but if mistakes made, it's permanent, the whole town suffers. To skip consultation is to show self-belief you're the smartest in town. However, even though, for example, a secret decision putting a pavilion beside a golf green may well be sheer genius, club members cannot be expected to have similar blind belief in their own representatives as you may have in yourselves. Instead, club members and the representatives must be free to report back to their fellow club members from meetings with the council. A committee of council is not a respectful vehicle by which to partner a club on its future. Better it be a joint working group of equals that addresses all CVU issues holistically, not piecemeal and in logical sequence. Firstly, anything to be done to retain a viable cause, which only then can be factored into determining a suitable clubhouse, which in turn will dictate the funding requirements from which a new lease can then finally be tailored to suit funding. A redevelopment was only raised relatively shortly before the lease is to expire, so that expiry should not dictate future planning or risk the club's survival. Instead, the existing lease should be extended by, say, 3 years to allow up to 5 years to complete investigations, then put in place a new lease and start building. That collaborative negotiation can also deliver other certainties. For example, agreed immediate safety improvements, processes and timelines, instead of more uncertainty. Even if limited, an immediate improvement to safety or disabled access can provide a lot of benefit in the meantime. Clubs entrust this council when they build at their members' expense on public land, from which their building cannot be separated and therefore belongs to whoever owns the land. But if this trust is not respected, that will dissuade all clubs from continuing to build and upkeep at members' expense, golf, tennis and clubhouse facilities for public use, and which allows ratepayer funds to instead build a pavilion for football, a skate park and rent-free upkeep for such sports. Our community overwhelmingly supports a viable golf course being retained, if need be by new fencing as a last resort rather than bits being closed to golf, but now somewhat at odds with the recent decisions that might be better revisited in favour of reaching agreement by negotiating on getting something done right away that at least improves the situation. There is no reason to stop golf club members in their choice on what they will spend their own funds. But I encourage you to move or support the deferral of 10.2.1 on your committee to next month's meeting and be open to negotiation in the meantime. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Morgan. Stephen Mellor.
I've got 3 points in my statement. In a response to my question 5A listed in tonight's agenda, page 6, it stated that the street tree policy is not part of the GIS and is operational, not strategic. I think otherwise, particularly as the policy preceded any GIS discussion and the street tree master plan. It should have been provided at every stage in the whole GIS formulation and consultation. It should now belatedly be included in the whole GIS process. It is a green foundation policy that informs the street tree master plan and subsequently the GIS process. and indeed gives the definition of what street trees is and defines area boundaries of the policy that covers the whole town, public areas and reserves. Even the officer report tonight references that same street tree policy regarding tree health. This is in a discussion on GIS, but it still refers back to the policy, which it has not provided. For examples of the importance of policies, the beach policy has been in the centre of consideration in the Indiana debate or in the foreshore master planning. Another point, having asked about elected members' workshops, I was also interested to see workshop feedback in the GIS officer report. This might be the first time some small slice of democratic transparency can be seen in the provision of slightly more details for the community to see what their elected members debate out of earshot in workshops. I would like to suggest this feedback report inclusion be set as a precedent and be continued practice in all future agenda reports. My last item, having straightforward public questions, making and asking public questions can be very frustrating when reading the responses. To me, it seems very strange that administration refused to add the dates of agenda forum meetings to the council's own events list on their own web pages. I'm so frustrated by the evasive response to R6 in tonight's papers. I believe such community engagement as agenda forums deserves a higher priority than advertising abstract cheese board making. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mallour. I might just address one point about that you said something about debate in workshops, and just assure you that workshops are for elected members to receive information and discuss. We don't debate, and I generally chair the workshops, and I'm pretty firm on that. I think.
Are you saying debate and discussion are different?
Yeah, yes, I am. Thank you. So now we're moving to Mrs. Sue Free.
Thank you. I'd like to speak on item 10.1.6 on behalf of Cottesloe Coast Care. On behalf of Coast Care, I'd like to thank the Council for its initiative in developing the Green Infrastructure Strategy and endorsing the Syrinx update to the Natural Areas Management Plan. In your consideration of the appointment of an external consultant to develop additional plans, I'd just like to make 3 points. Firstly, in framing the plans for the natural areas, it will be important for the consultant to get input from Coast Care about the NAM and the resourcing required. Coast Care has significant experience and proven success in coastal dune restoration in Cottesloe. Its contribution played a significant part in the improvements seen in the Syrinx report. Coast Care's contribution has been more than a volunteer community organisation would normally provide. As expected of a volunteer group, Coast Care mobilises and supervises volunteers, including community, corporate and school groups. On top of this, Coast Care has been acting as a de facto bush care officer. 2 experienced volunteers with significant professional and local knowledge have worked with the town's environmental projects officer and provided many of the services normally expected of a bush care officer. This is very hands-on and on-the-ground work, advising depot staff and contractors on things such as assessing dune conditions, prioritising areas for planting and advising on site preparation and maintenance. However, these experienced volunteers are ageing and soon will not be able to offer the same level of support. While CCA will be able to provide volunteer labour, it is highly unlikely that this level of expertise will be available in a volunteer capacity in the future. The implications of this need to be understood and planned for. Secondly, to develop an effective plan for the natural areas, the consultant appointed must have an understanding of natural areas management and preferably coastal dune restoration. The coast is a harsh and dynamic environment. It is not parks and gardens. An expert in street tree management is unlikely to be able to provide advice on dune restoration. Successful coastal restoration requires specific skills and knowledge, including erosion control, plant choice, planting techniques, weed control and ongoing maintenance. Effective planning needs to consider these issues. And finally, just a reminder of the importance of Cottesloe's natural areas. Most of Cottesloe's natural areas are the dunes on the coastal foreshore, the most visited part of Cottesloe. Restoration is not only important for stabilisation and protection from erosion, but also for amenity and aesthetics, as well as maintaining a biodiversity corridor along the coast. And there is strong community support. 93% of respondents in the recent survey felt it was important to maintain and restore the natural areas of Cottesloe. A lot has been achieved since the first Syrinx survey. We've gone from 33% in good to very good condition in 2015, up to 57% in 2022. And a target of 75% is possible in the next 5 years with good planning and the right resourcing. So let's keep going and let's get on with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Frith. Are we having a deputation on Station Street as well? No. Okay. Thank you. We do. Yep. Attendance. Here we go. We have no apologies this evening. We have a full house of councillors, I think, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We do have Councillor Thomas attending remotely, and Councillor Thomas, could I please get you to make the declaration required under the Act?
Sure. I declare I'm in a secure private location, dialing into my hotel room. I'll be alone for the duration unless that allows me to participate fully and maintain confidentiality.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thomas. Do we have any applications for...
Chair, if I may, from a staff perspective, just like to introduce Miss Magna Damaska, who's sitting in to get some experience in regards to the council meeting, should we need someone to provide relief for minutes in the future. So,
Thank you. Thank you. Do we have any applications for... we don't have anyone on leave of absence, so applications for leave of absence. Any applications? Okay then, declarations of interest. Anyone? Yes, Councillor Harkins.
Thank you. I'd like to declare impartiality in 10.1.7 Healthy Streets projects. I live in that vicinity, but I'm able to make decisions impartially. And 13.1.1 Community Citizens of the Year. Some of the organisations and nominees are known to me, but again, I'm able to make the decisions impartially. Thank you.
Councillor Wilinko.
I'd like to make an impartiality declaration of interest for item 10.1.4. I'm familiar with the principles of the applicant planning firm Element Advisory, but I can make my decision with impartiality. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others? Councillor Irvine.
Yeah, 10.1.6 GIS, living in Napier Street, and also residents in those areas are known to me, but I can make my decisions impartially. 10.1.7 Healthy Streets, the same. 13.1.1, I'm a member of the one of the institutions that is discussed in the papers, but I can make my decision impartially.
Thank you, Councillor Irvine. Councillor Sadler.
Thank you. I'd like to declare an impartiality interest in 10.1.7, the Healthy Streets projects. One of the consultants is known to me, and 13.1.1, the Community Citizen of the Year Awards. One of the applicants is known to me, but I can make my decision with impartiality. Thank you.
Thank you. No.
I'd like to declare an impartiality interest in 10.1.6 because I live on a street which has Norfolk Island pines on it, including a dead one. The dead one's gone, but there was a dead one.
Anyone else? I'll make a declaration in respect of item 10.1.7, the Healthy Streets item. Residents on the relevant streets are known to me, but I can make a decision impartially. 13.1.1 Citizens of the Year Awards. Some of the nominees are known to me, but I can make a decision on that impartially. on merit. So, confirmation of minutes. We are looking for someone to move that council, that we confirm the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on Tuesday 22nd October 2024, that they be confirmed as a true and accurate record. Councillor Harkins and Councillor Sadler, all in favour? Thank you, that's unanimous. We do have a deputation this evening from Mr. David Rogers. Mr. Rogers, I think you have 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. David Rogers from Seaview Golf Club. So good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Councillors, CEO, Directors and staff. So I'm here tonight to ask the Council to defer any decision as per item 10.1.5 on the development approval for the Seaview Clubhouse and revert to approving the original DA. The reasons the club wants to progress with this approval are as follows. The clubhouse was built in 1970 with members' money from the sale of the original clubhouse, which was on Forest Street. Over the years, the club has made some minor improvements, which included a grant from the town to help with repairs and maintenance. The club provided a list of improvements from our previous president when queried on how the grant was spent. For many years, the club has recognised that disabled access and disabled toilet facilities are an absolute necessity. Where was I? Sorry, my technology has become quite difficult. Okay, where was I? In particular, for our older members and for our disabled or wheelchair-bound individuals. This has come into particular focus recently as one of our members, Paul Edmondson, has a disabled daughter who used to be able to access the club regularly and can no longer gain access, which is a problem for Paul, and I know that Paul, I think he wrote into the local press, and I also provided that to elected members. I also have a disabled nephew who was not able to enter the clubhouse at a function some time ago, and this brings it to our attention on a regular basis that we cannot have a function for people with disabilities who require a wheelchair because they can't get into the clubhouse, and that's simply not good enough. With this background, our members endorsed a proposal at the last AGM in March of this year to spend up to $220,000 to make these minor yet important improvements to club access. We understand that one of the arguments from Council, it was a waste of club resources to do this work to the clubhouse now, when there is potentially a development of the clubhouse down the road. Whilst we understand this argument, we also bring to your attention that the DA, if approved, will provide short to medium term resolution of what is a moral and ethical issue which requires resolution and has been wholly endorsed by our membership, as no one can actually point to a date in the future when there will be redevelopment and this issue requires action now. I go to the officer comment, and in the first paragraph the officer says, "We're of the view that it may no longer be appropriate." Well, we say it is entirely appropriate for the council to endorse this DA and that it should proceed in that way. As many members of our club have said to me, it's not up to the council on how the club expends its funds. And I note also in the third paragraph of the officer's comment, it is recommended that the club's funds, which would otherwise been spent on the refurbishment work associated, be expended following feasibility studies. Well, the club hasn't agreed to anything, but the club fully supports making an improvement to this building, which we say is well overdue. So on behalf of the golf club, I'm appealing to your sense of what is moral and what is right, and allow our members' wishes to be granted and to proceed with the original DA, rejecting the proposal before tonight's meeting and fixing a problem that exists with our clubhouse. There are many other variables that go along with the lease, reaching agreement, and which we're working through. Although as I see it, this matter is quite simple. We put those matters to one side, we're dealing with those, we're engaging with those matters, and that's important, obviously important to our future as well. The clubhouse needs some interim improvements. All at our own expense, and if those improvements are changed in years to come, our members are quite happy with that, and will go along with whatever changes that may be. We just want to get on and do this without any further issue. We are making every effort to be a good citizen and supportive of those people in the community which you represent that have access issues, and surely that is a fair request. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. I'm now going to run through the officers' reports. If you just bear with me. Mrs. Freeth, I think you're here for the Green Infrastructure Strategy Public Consultation, 10.1.6. Will you be remaining for that if we move it forward? I move that the 10.1.6 be dealt with as the first item on the agenda, and that we then revert to the agenda as published. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Harkins. All in favour? Thank you. That.
Through the chair, do you not want to do en bloc first?
Yes, I do. I'm going to go back, Mrs. Freeth, and we'll do, what we're going to do is identify the items that have been called up for debate this evening. Thank you. CEO, would you mind just identifying which ones have been called up for debate?
Through the chair, item 10.1.2 hasn't been called up, but it requires an absolute majority decision, being a waiver. 10.1.4 has been called up. 10.1.6, 10.1.7, 10.1.8, because that requires an absolute majority, and items 13.1.1, 13.1.2 and 13.1.3, as those matters have been recommended to be discussed behind closed doors.
Yeah, 10.1.5 is called up as well.
Call up 10.1.5 as well.
So the items which are going to be dealt with en bloc, 10.1.1 review of record keeping policy, 10.1.3 monthly financial statements for the period 1 July 24 to 30 September 24, 10.2.1 receipt of Seaview Golf Club Redevelopment Advisory Committee meetings. So do I have a mover that they be dealt with en bloc? Councillor Heath, and a seconder, Councillor Wilinko. All in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. For members of the public, that means that those items will be go through and they will be passed in the terms of the officer's recommendation. They won't be called up for debate. They're now passed in those terms. So now we do have a successful motion earlier to change the order. So I'm going to call item 10.1.6, Green Infrastructure Strategy Public Consultation. To get the ball rolling, do I have someone to move? Well, I'm not proposing amendments, so I can move the officer's recommendation from the chair. Do I have a seconder for the officer's recommendation? Councillor Wilinko. which does not stop you, Councillor Willinco, from moving amendments if you choose. What I will say is this has been a phenomenal amount of work. It's great to get some positive feedback on the strategy. Broadly, I think we are where we need to be, and I commend the staff for their patience and perseverance as we've got to this stage, and I look forward to the next stage. Did you want to speak to it, Councillor Willinco?
If I might, I just wanted to echo those comments. I think I was the one that put up the motion to defer originally until we had a further workshop on this. And I'd just like to say that I think that this motion is much improved to the previous one, and I think it demonstrates the degree of work and effort that's gone in, and I think it's a very good motion.
Thank you. Now, I am aware that there are amendments, so Councillor Bulbeck, I think now is the time for you to pipe up. And what I suggest you do is just to call out the amendment you're proposing, which would be that, for example, that paragraph 2A of the officer's recommendation be amended by the addition of the words blah, 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 and so on and so forth. That's so that it's very clear to Ms Pilkington and to other elected members what we're dealing with. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. Unfortunately, I didn't see that clarification until I left the House, so I have on the run put that in, but that's a much better way to be able to do amendments, so thank you so much. I thought you had to repeat the whole officer's recommendation.
So do you want to just read out what
Yes, I will now.
Yeah, thank you.
So my proposed amendment number 1 is the officer's recommendation be amended as shown in red below, and then it's 2A, step 1, develop additional plans required to deliver green infrastructure targets, in particular the 30% canopy cover by 2040 and an increase in planted natural areas by 5,000 square metres per annum until 2030, which is 0.5 hectares per annum on average, consulting with key stakeholders including Cottesloe Coast Care Association, Western Australian and Cottesloe Tree Canopy Advocates and Perth NRM. And then 3A, develop a long-term plan that identifies well-balanced measures for achieving the 30% canopy by 2040 and the increase in planted natural areas by 5,000 square metres per annum until 2030, which then considers the outcomes of, I better read the whole thing, from the final Street Tree Master Plan, Natural Areas Management Plan and the additional public open space landscaping concept for planting within these areas, and the maintenance plan to ensure best practice and cost effectiveness in the preservation and expansion of all green infrastructure.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for this motion, this amendment? Councillor Sadler?
I'd be happy to second it if we weren't also having to have asked the administration to consult the WA and Cottesloe Tree Canopy Advocates. But as I say, that's not the amendment which is in front of us. But
Councillor Bulbeck, you can...
So you were can I clarify with Councillor Sadler,
amendment
including
is...
Cottesloe Coast Care Association and Perth NRM, is that what you're saying would be the
Yes.
amendment? If that's the only way to get a seconder, I'll accept that.
So on that basis, I'm going to say, does anyone want to speak against this amendment? Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. Through the chair to Councillor Bulbeck. I'm just unclear as to why it's repeated. So you, in red at the first paragraph, it's talking about 30% canopy and 500 square metres, but then it's also in 3A. Why does it need to be in both?
Because
Excuse my ignorance.
3A has, I talked about the 30% canopy by 2040. So I just wanted to add it in because I believe that the two objectives have equal weight. That was the reason why I've just put it in alongside what was already there in the officer's recommendation.
What I'm going to do, is anyone going to speak against the amendment? If they are, if there's no one to speak against it, I'll put it to the vote. Otherwise, I will go back to Councillor Bulbeck to speak to the amendment. Yes, but I just want to know if there was nobody against, then we could go straight to the vote. Councillor Bulbeck, can you speak to it?
So the...
okay,
Sorry.
thank you. Sorry, we've got a seconder in Councillor Sadler.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So the proposed amendments seek to give similar status to the biodiversity and canopy targets in the GIS by including them in our resolution. The 30% canopy by 2040 is success indicator 1 in objective 1, and the increase in planted natural areas is success indicator 1 in objective 3. Secondly, is to ensure input is sought from non-government groups with specific expertise in green infrastructure and community engagement, the latter being objective 5 of the GIS, and in particular Cottesloe Coast Care Association. Objective 5 of the GIS concerns community involvement in greening the district, stating Cottesloe Coast Care Association and the extended Cottesloe community are the community's greatest asset in greening and restoring. If the town is going to meet Objective 5 and thus contribute to the other objectives, the goodwill and expertise of our community groups must be marshalled. A partnership between the Town of Cottesloe Coast Care Association since 2015 has removed 4.2 hectares from the completely degraded category, which is 0.6 hectares per annum on average. If the town is to achieve 0.5 hectares per annum planting until 2030, drawing on Coast Care's expertise will be essential, in particular working on the unique challenges of stabilising the coastal dunes. Point 4 no longer applies, unfortunately. Perth NRM is a partner with the town in the Natural Areas Alliance, supporting in particular grant applications and community engagement.
Thank you. Councillor Sadler, do you want to speak to that?
Only to say that I think that the town is actually does value the input of the Coast Care and Perth NRM, and it's just important, I think, to have that sort of documented that it is going to be a collaborative approach going forward, and we want to strengthen the development and improvement of the natural areas. And I just want to thank Councillor Bulbeck for being prepared to remove the Cottesloe Tree Canopy Advocates and the West Australian Tree Canopy Advocates, not because I think that they don't do good work, but I think that they're actually acting in an advocacy role, and that significant resource is required of the administration each time they reach out and do things. So I wanted to constrain it to getting expertise rather than actually looking at advocacy. So that was my reason, just to sort of reduce down the amount of work the administration had to do, while still actually recognising the value of having a strong advocacy group in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilenko, you wanted to speak against?
Thank you. Actually, I think I'm going to withdraw that. I had the same concern. That seemed to be repetitious, and I wasn't quite clear what was going on with the 5,000, but I think that's been explained now, so I'm happy to withdraw that.
Anyone else? Is anyone going to speak against the motion? If not, I will put it to the vote. All in favour? And Councillor Thomas there, thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you. Councillor Bulbeck.
So my proposed amendment number 2, the officer's recommendation be amended as shown in red below, and 3B, establish a significant tree register of regulated trees as defined in Wales model local planning policy, tree retention, to determine the location of such trees so that their retention can be achieved through community education and encouragement as part of the planning development application assessment process, and incentives and strategies supported by the state government or recommended by WALBA. For example, the model local planning tree policy tree retention to retain regulated trees on private land.
Do you have a seconder? Councillor Sadler. Is anyone going to speak against the motion? I will be, so Councillor Thomas.
I couldn't hear the motion. I think the one
I will repeat the motion. that the officer's recommendation be amended by rewording paragraph 3B as follows: establish a significant tree register of mature trees as defined in WALGA's model local planning policy tree retention.
It's that one.
Oh, okay. Thank you. To determine the location of such trees so that their retention can be achieved through community education and encouragement as part of the planning development application assessment process, and incentives and strategies supported by the state government or recommended by WALGA, for example, the model local planning policy tree retention, to retain regulated trees on private land. Thank you. I think these have been circulated. Yeah. So you might find it on your emails if that's helpful, Councillor Thomas. Look, I think Councillor Bulbeck will speak because I think that it won't be unopposed. So.
Can I ask a question?
Well, I'm going to oppose it, so I think we can move on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Go to the rationale.
Mm-hmm.
The proposed change from significant to regulated trees gives clarity to the trees that will be covered in Objective 2. Limiting the ambit to trees on heritage properties, as has been suggested, will be completely inadequate to meeting the objective of 30% canopy cover by 2040. This is made very clear where the GIS points out that legislative protection of trees on private land will be required to achieve the 30% canopy target. And then quoting, if mature trees can be legislatively retained on private land, the set target of 30% total canopy cover, private and public land by 2040, will be achievable, with my emphasis on the legislatively. And this is because 80% of all trees within urban areas are located on private land. Almost 2/3 of survey respondents strongly endorse the proposal to protect trees on private land, and only 15% opposed strongly or somewhat opposed. 10% of those making comments misunderstood the objective as requiring all blocks to have 30% canopy coverage, and only 20% opposed on the basis of a violation of property rights. 33% understood that regulating trees was akin to the town imposing planning regulations on building heights, privacy, noise, and so on. 16 councils have engaged with WALGA's tree preservation policy template, including our neighbours, the Shire of Peppermint Grove and City of Nedlands. The state government has indicated funding might become available to increase tree retention on private land. The proposed amendment allows the town to apply for such funding. The officer's response to Councillor Mason's motion in February 2024 for a policy to protect mature trees suggests that the time might now be right to reconsider such a policy. The officer's response was that the administration does support the matter being reconsidered once the town has an improved local planning strategy, almost we have that, an endorsed greening infrastructure strategy, we'll soon have that. Appropriate provisions related to the retention of trees are incorporated in the new town planning scheme, envisaged in the officer's proposal for this item, and there is better understanding on the legal position in relation to the existing state planning framework and interpretation of relevant legislation. WALGA's tree retention policy is built on legal advice.
Thank you, Councillor Sadler.
Look, thank you. I think that Councillor Bulbeck has summed it up really well, and I think that we've asked our community their views on this, and clearly it's a really controversial subject. This is not unfamiliar territory for other states around the country who are doing far better than WA is in terms of tree canopy, and we are unlikely to meet our targets unless we actually look what's happening on private land. And I also want to sort of back up what Councillor Bulbeck has said with regard to me feeling uncomfortable actually having to not support Councillor Mason's motion in February, and so now I'm sort of coming back going, well, here's the way forward in terms of potentially identifying ways that we can look at what's happening on private land and develop a framework by which we can identify mature trees, regulated trees, and create incentives for them to be preserved and also to really grow our canopy. So I would be happy to support this. Thank you.
I'm going to speak against the motion, just addressing a couple of issues in the rationale. There isn't a suggestion that the policy would be limited to trees on heritage property. The response on page 31 of the agenda indicates clearly that it is not as limited. I think the figures that have come back from the community don't show support they may show support for some steps to protect trees on private property. They don't show support for a mandated approach. The state government is talking about incentives for the retention of trees on private property, but they are not talking about a mandated approach, and they made that very clear. The night that this topic was last considered by council happened to be the night that the Kalamunda policy was revoked. Now that policy is actually not as broad as the Walga draft policy. For example, that policy did exempt all DA, the removal of a tree that was associated with a DA that did not require development approval was exempt from the Kalamunda policy. So that means they exempted DAs for single houses, patios, pergolas, granny flats, swimming pools and garages. Those exemptions were introduced by the state government to cut red tape. The Kalamunda policy, as I've said, was revoked earlier this year on the night that we were considering bringing one in. And if anyone has taken the time to watch the debate on the Kalamunda policy, it was broadly because the policy conferred too much power on planning staff with no clear indication of how that power was to be exercised. And council felt that staff were taking a very strict and literal approach to tree retention, which is hardly surprising given the terms of that policy. The Walga policy contains really very little indication on how a DA for a tree is to be determined. It talks about balancing tree preservation with desired built form and land use outcomes, but the section relating to the development application provides a general presumption against tree removal and says that siting and design should, where possible, avoid impacting regulated trees. And that's an incredibly broad and subjective criteria because it's always possible to redesign. You don't have a swimming pool, move your swimming pool to the front garden, make the house smaller, put it somewhere on the block that you don't particularly want. Don't worry about passive solar design if a tree's in the way. So I think the policy is just far too broad and confers probably a power on planning staff that they don't particularly want to have to tackle. I'm very comfortable with the idea of waiting to see how the state government works its way through this. So I can't support the policy on that basis. Did anyone else want to speak for the motion? No, it's an amendment. No. Does anyone want... Well, if nobody else is speaking for... Councillor? Well, yeah.
I'd also speak against the motion for a couple of reasons. One, I'm not sure that a regulated tree as defined in the Walga Model Local Planning Policy will necessarily fit our context. in the answer to the question, which trees are to be included, the officer said that other parameters will be determined based on advice from the external expert and include but not limited to how other local governments are categorizing such trees, what works for them, and the classification method that works best for Cottesloe. A flat-out 8-meter high, 6-meter canopy, circumference of 1.5 meters is a very broad and I think quite a blunt way of defining the trees that need to be saved. So that's my first concern. My second concern is I'm not clear on what the second part of the amendment even does, unless there's a verb missing here, because it just says, and incentives and strategies. Now, I'm not sure if that word investigate is supposed to be via incentives and strategies. Maybe there's something there, I'm not sure, to determine the location, community education, encouragement, and via incentives and strategies supported by the state government. The second part of that just doesn't make sense to me, so those are my reasons.
You can suggest a change to the wording.
Well, the way it reads is their retention can be achieved through incentives and strategies supported by, so all of those things, and then including incentives and strategies.
Sorry, just for clarity, so it can be achieved through community education and encouragement and incentives and strategies?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
And the WALGA template model local planning policy is only an example that's given there. It's not the required. None of these things are required, is my understanding of how that's framed, but I might be wrong about that.
Well, I think it has to stand on its face anyway. I think that's probably enough. I'm going to put the amendment to the vote. All in favour? It's Councillor Sadler and Bulbeck. And against? That is, I see Councillor Thomas. That's all other elected members. Have you got that, Ms Pilkington? So that amendment is lost. Now, there are more. So, yep, please.
Okay. So this is proposed amendment number 3. The officer's recommendation be amended as shown in red below. So this relates to the natural areas management plan. So 7 instructs the chief executive officer to incorporate hyperlinks in the original, to the 2008 original version natural areas management plan as 2015 addendum within the attached September 2023 series report on the natural areas management plan.
Reminder to turn the mic on.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Bulbeck, can I suggest that you read your amendment as that the officer's recommendation be amended, the paragraphs by including in paragraph 7 after the word September 2023, the words SIREX report. And that way you don't have to read the whole thing out.
Thank you very much. I'll try and do that on the run.
Yep.
It's even getting better and better in terms of how much I have to say, so that's okay. So let me, so recommendation 8B, I think I might read the whole of that out.
Paragraph 8B. Yep.
Paragraph 8B. So this endorses all the recommendations and the proposed long-term budget within the September 2023 endorsed document, except the following. B, recommendation 1 pertaining to the employment of a full-time bush care officer, as this will be assessed as part of the town's workforce planning process. And I'm proposing, following late additional advice from the CEO, to actually strike out that drawing on the expertise. And then item 9, to append to the end of within the attached natural areas management plan, including to consult them, so that'll be Cottesloe Coast Care Association and Perth NRM, including to consult them concerning the role of a dedicated natural areas on-the-ground manager described as a bush care officer in the 2023 SIREX report on the natural areas management plan. 10 instructs the Chief Executive Officer to add to that at the end of that, and to include this in the presentation mentioned at item 11, and to add to item 11 at the end of that with the aim of informing the 2025-2026 budget deliberations.
Councillor Bulbeck, you appear to have, you've scored through paragraph 8C.
Oh, my apologies, yes.
And the removal of paragraph 8C.
Yes, and the removal, my apologies, the removal of paragraph 8C, yep.
Can I suggest that you might want to break this up and deal with the amendment that you're proposing to paragraph 8C as a separate amendment? In fact, I'm going to do that. I'm able to do that under the standing orders just because there's a lot going on there and that can be dealt with as a standalone. So we'll deal with that. So you've read out that your proposed amendment there. Do you have a seconder for the amendments that you've read out?
Just 8C you're saying at this stage?
No, the balance other than 8C. Is there a seconder?
Only for the purposes of some of these things that need to be happening.
Sorry?
If there's something which is being struck out and we think that that's a good idea, then we're breaking this up. So I want to clarify, I mean, it doesn't impact my voting, but you're saying we're breaking this up. I'm not sure what I'm
The only
seconding.
thing in the proposed amendment that we're not considering as the first amendment is the deletion of paragraph 8C.
Okay. And what about where it says September 2023 Syrinx report on the...
That's included. That was Councillor Bulbeck read that out.
So
it's everything other than the removal, everything that you see here, other than that Councillor Bulbeck has withdrawn the words drawing on expertise from, etc. And we are going to deal with 8C as a separate amendment. Okay. Look, I'm quite willing to second the motion at this stage, and Councillor Bulbeck can speak to it.
Thank you. So that first point of the rationale applies to the struck through bit, so I'll come back to that. The second point, so the rationale is the proposed amendments seek to confirm the town's commitment to our natural areas through endorsing the Syrinx report's recommendation that the natural areas require dedicated on-the-ground expert supervision if they are to expand to the same extent as has been achieved since 2015. Ensuring that Cottesloe Coast Care's 30 years on-the-ground experience, expertise and dedication in coastal restoration is drawn on in identifying how best to replace the imminent loss of that expertise with the retirement of 2 key Coast Care volunteers. I should probably say begging the town to heed or listen to, might be a better way of phrasing that in terms of what I've heard from the CEO. But anyway, I'll carry on. So maintaining the natural areas budget recommendations in the Syrinx report. The Syrinx report found that good outcomes had been achieved in only 2 of the 6 KPIs identified in the Natural Areas Management Plan addendum in 2015. There was good improvement in the increase in good quality vegetation and pathways to the beach, but inadequate outcomes in persistence of weeds, reduction of feral animals, and even worse outcomes in drainage on slopes and funds for management of natural areas. On page 17, the report noted impediments to achieving high standards of natural areas restoration, including poor resourcing, suboptimal use of contractors, reduction in the maintenance budget and failure of knowledge transfer. Of the 4.2 hectares that the Syrinx report calculated moved from completely degraded since 2015, 60% of those were the responsibility of Cottesloe Coast Care Association. CCA believes that there will be a pool of volunteers into the future given the turnouts on Tree Day and other community planting events, but there are no younger volunteers wishing to step up into coordinating and managing planting and maintenance regimes and the supervision of volunteers at community events. There was strong survey support for a bush care officer, 60% strongly in favour and 18% somewhat supportive, with a number of comments identifying the long-term risk to the town of over-reliance on Coast Care's volunteers. For example, Coast Care's work commended. However, recognising they are volunteers, there should be knowledgeable, trained staff who guide and lead necessary work on natural areas management, rather than Coast Care having the responsibility. The key Cottesloe Coast Care team members are very concerned that their long years of volunteering in conjunction with the town will be overtaken by the deterioration of our coastal dunes and the return of weeds if the town does not take this opportunity to transfer that expertise. Coast Care have specifically asked Council to support their request to assist the town to best outline the skills and resources needed in the proposed bush care officer. Ideally, this proposal should be included in the 2025-2026 budget discussions to achieve timely succession planning and move beyond the long planning phase into a planting phase for the GIS.
Thank you, Councillor Bulbeck. As the seconder, I would just like to say I think everybody fully understands the work that Coast Care do and the fact that we might be losing that support for our natural areas management really very soon. They do get outstanding results that are really would be the envy of most natural area management organisations. And I fully understand why it is not appropriate for Council to stipulate exactly what this new person that we are going to be likely including in the workforce plan. We haven't got to that stage. And, you know, we can't be prescriptive, but I think that it would be a wasted opportunity to not be able to listen to Coast Care about what kind of skills and expertise are really peculiar to Cottesloe that would be the most beneficial for that role. We're going to be asked when we do a workforce plan to consider that role, and I think it would be really helpful to understand what that would look like. And then if we do, with the workforce plan, say that we're going to go ahead with that, we know what we're getting and we know that the money will be well spent because the right expertise will be there. So I'm very aware of trying not to stand on anyone's toes, and I fully respect the separation between Council's role and the administration and the CEO. We only employ one person, and that's the CEO, and the CEO is responsible for employment of everyone else. The one area that we do get to have a say is in the workforce plan, and before I give the yay or nay to a bush care officer in the workforce plan, I'd really want to understand what that meant and that we were going to be spending that money really well. So I really think this is a good balance of being able to get it right. So I do encourage elected members to support it. I know we all support Coast Care, so I really do encourage support. Does anyone want to speak against?
Can I, through the chair, can I just ask, we've seen emails this afternoon from the CEO regarding this proposed amendment, quite strongly worded emails as far as where our role is and what we can and can't do. Does that need to be clarified before we vote on this, or can we hear from the CEO in light of how the amendment's now written?
Absolutely.
So, as I've advised Council, the functions of the CEO are quite well defined in the Act under section, excuse me, just reading my own writing here, 5.41, particularly point G, which basically makes the CEO responsible for the employment and all matters relating to the employment of staff other than the CEO, which is the privilege of Council. That being said, it does put the CEO in a very invidious position where Council is now instructing the CEO to consult with an external body in regards to a role that he now may put into the workforce plan. The question is if I consult and I don't accept everything that comes from that external party, I've got the issue of then that external party then going to Council and saying, well, your CEO is not listening to us. Vice versa, if I do accept the full consultation and deliver what is requested, it then creates a precedent for any other organisation potentially to lobby council to say, well, we want another officer to do X, do something different. And you've effectively set it a precedent in regards to how that would be dealt with. So I have cautioned council that this is starting to get into the role of the functions of the CEO under 5.41G, and I think potentially council needs to understand the position it puts the CEO in. Council can consult directly with Coast Care if it wishes to, but the actual amendment is an instruction for me to consult with Coast Care, which then creates an expectation for that external organisation, and then puts me, or puts the CEO, in a very difficult position in regards to whether or not, based on other information that I may be privy to, which Coast Care isn't, or other advice that I get from my other staff in regards to that position and how it should be done, I'm potentially creating a conflict between one organisation and the town. So that's my concern.
Can I, look, as the presiding member, I can't accept an amendment, or I'm going to have to withdraw an amendment if I think that we are potentially breaching the Act. And as much as I'd really like to find a way forward, in light of what the CEO said, I think I am going to have to not accept the amendment.
Am I allowed to say, just to repeat what that item 9 says, just to draw people's attention to it? It requests the administration to do the things that the officer has suggested that the administration will do, which is to continue collaborating with Cottesloe Coast Care and Perth NRM, and then, I've added on, including to consult them. So I've tried to make it as weak as possible, but at the same time say, this is something that Coast Care really cares about.
I think you're now arguing again, look, we're in this situation where the CEO has given fairly clear advice that we are crossing over, and I think there will be a way forward to ensure the same outcome, to ensure that the information that we seek is obtained. But I'm going to have to withdraw it because, as the presiding member, you'll notice that the information I sent out today in relation to just getting amendments right does include that I can't accept anything that would be breaching the law. So I am...
Just wondering if there might be a way forward, which would be, again, to further amend this amendment, to delete those lines, but to keep, for example, the amendments to part item 10, item 11, item 7.
Yeah, so I would only be withdraw. Yeah. I'll have to take that out. The amendments to paragraph 9. Yes, but you're right, it would be only those parts that I would be taking out of the amendment. I'm still happy to second the motion with... Yeah.
I'm sorry. That is
Okay.
that's what I want.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I do understand. Councillor Bulbeck, I'm going to have, we've had the advice. Yeah. Yeah, okay, so the amendment is withdrawn.
Can Councillor Bulbeck please use a mic?
Yeah, sorry, sorry. So the amendment's withdrawn. Yep, thank you. And you did have one more.
You had part C.
Oh, yes, sorry, thank you. You did, sorry?
I'd be happy to move that as amendment with if that one's...
You're talking about the removal of paragraph C?
Yes, I'd be happy to remove an amendment which does everything apart from the changes that Councillor Bulbeck has suggested in point 9, because I think there are some merits and everything else. But I was uncomfortable
Okay.
even prior to the administration's confirmation about our potential toes being over the line. But
Okay,
was comfortable
I
with
understand
everything
what you're saying. So what Councillor Sadler is saying is that she would move an amendment in the terms of Councillor Bulbeck's amendment with the deletion of the wording in 8B and in 9 it would be the deletion of the words drawing on expertise from the Natural Areas Alliance members Cottesloe Coast Care and Perth NRM from paragraph 8B and including that final part of paragraph 9 from the words including to consult through to the end. And we're still leaving paragraph 8C as a separate item to be dealt with. So does everyone understand?
No. Sorry, my apologies, I don't understand. I think you're just saying remove all the red, basically. Is that right?
Well, there wouldn't be an amendment if we were removing all the red.
But
Look, Councillor Sadler has Councillor Sadler can move that motion.
Yeah.
She has moved the motion.
But I don't understand what it is. Is that important or not?
It is. It is the amendment that you have put forward,
Yeah.
except that from paragraph 8B, the words starting drawing on expertise
Yep.
is removed.
I'd removed that already, yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, but this is now Councillor Sadler's amendment.
Okay.
Paragraph 9 would remove all the wording from the words including to consult them. And paragraph 8C will be dealt with as a separate item.
10 and 11.
Yes, but they're staying in.
Yep.
So it's everything in red on the page except what has been removed from those paragraphs. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Willinco. Councillor Sadler.
Look, I don't want to overstate it, but I think there were some merits in some of the clarifications that Councillor Bulbeck has made, particularly in point 7, where she's actually included that it is the September 23 CIRINCS report on the Natural Areas Management Plan, and some of the comments that say, particularly in points 10 and 11, and at the end of 11, where she's saying, with the aim of informing the 2025-2026 budget deliberations. I think that that's very valid, and so I'm very happy to include them. So nothing more to add apart from that.
Councillor Willinco.
I have nothing to add to that. Thank you.
Does anyone want to speak against?
Sorry.
Councillor, I saw Councillor Bulbeck's hand went up and your hand went up. Are you speaking?
Yes, I am speaking. Do you want me to speak now?
I did actually, I'll go to Councillor Bulbeck because I did see Councillor Bulbeck first, but I didn't understand if you were asking a question or... No. Councillor Bulbeck.
Just to say I think it makes the resolution a bit clearer that it obviously takes out the purpose of the amendment. So, yeah.
You going to speak again?
Yeah, just querying 8B. Now that the second part of that red has gone, I actually don't quite understand the point of it, but I mean, I'll let it go. But I mean, what's it doing? I don't. As this will be assessed, as opposed to as this is the subject of the outcome. I can't see the difference there, to be honest.
One's past tense and one's future
Yeah,
tense.
but
I think grammatically it makes more sense the way Councillor Bulbeck.
Okay.
Anyone? I'm very comfortable with these amendments, so I think that we can quite comfortably support them. Anyone speaking against? All in favour? So that's Councillor Thomas and other elected members other than Councillor Bulbeck. Councillor Bulbeck, are you against?
I'm voting against.
Okay,
yes,
thank you.
I am.
So that is passed. Now, Councillor Bulbeck, you also have, I've asked you to separate out paragraph 8C. That would, so the amendment would be that paragraph 8 of the officer's recommendation be amended by the removal of subparagraph C.
Yeah. So,
So do you want to move that?
yes, I might as well.
Okay.
So,
No, if that's, you need a seconder.
oh, yes, sorry.
Is there a seconder for the motion? Which one is this? The removal of paragraph C. In paragraph, removal of paragraph 8C. It's scored through in black.
Can I explain it? Is that possible?
No, but I think it's not a question of explaining it at the moment, it's just a question of Councillor Sadler.
Okay, if between them they can work it out, then it doesn't need to be explained, yeah.
So Councillor Sadler, if you look at Councillor Bulbeck's original amendment, paragraph 8C has been scored through in black. Have you got that? Yeah. That we haven't yet dealt with, and we are now dealing with it. Okay, so that's Councillor Bulbeck and Councillor Sadler. Councillor Bulbeck, do you want to speak to that?
So the purpose of that is to leave recommendation C in the natural areas management, the steering report on the natural areas management plan, and the rationale is that point 1 at the bottom there. The proposed amendment seeks to confirm the town's commitment to our natural areas through a presumption of maintaining the operational budget at $90,000 per annum. In consultation with the administration, it was explained to me that that the budget would not necessarily remain at $90,000 per annum going forward, so I wanted to restore our commitment to that as a council.
Councillor Sadler? Does anyone want to speak against? I'm going to have to speak against it because I don't fully understand the implications, and I know that this was discussed several times in recent budget, and to the extent that there are changes in finances needed, I'm really happy for them to be dealt with in the mid-year budget review or in our budget process going forward where we can fully understand it. I do recall it was very confusing in our budget workshops, and I don't understand the administration are saying that we've already approved the amount where the amount has risen from 60 to 90, and we're removing that recommendation now.
No, we're adding it back.
We're adding,
so we're keeping it in because the administration has supported it.
Yeah. Well, I'm not able to support it because I find it all very unclear, and I prefer budgeting to come out through budget workshops, and that we will be having a mid-year budget review early next year. And I'm very supportive of funding our natural areas management, but I don't want to make approve a motion that I don't fully understand. So, does anyone else want to speak to the motion? Councillor Wilenko?
I might just point out that in an answer to a question about this, the officers pointed out that whether or not the natural areas allocation is reduced to 60 or remains at 90 in subsequent years is a decision of council at the time it deliberates any future annual budget. So I think the point is, do we lock ourselves in, or do we 60 or 90 or 100 or 70 or whatever makes sense at the time, as opposed to forecasting forward and saying it should be 90 now?
Yeah. Anyone else wants to speak to this? All in favour of the amendment? Councillor Bulbeck against. That's all others. So that amendment has failed. There's one more.
There's one more. This is the last one. So that the officer's recommendation be amended by the inclusion of a new paragraph 12 as follows: brings to council in 2027 a review of progress towards the goals in the green infrastructure strategy, which reflect on the results of the 2025 canopy heat mapping and identify progress with particular attention to the goals of 30% canopy cover by 2040 and increase in good or better quality planted natural areas by 5,000 square metres per annum until 2030, with recommendations for change practices where the annualised achievement of these objectives has not been met.
And a seconder? Councillor Valenko. Councillor Bulbeck?
So the rationale, the additional clause is added to ensure that council is informed of progress towards achieving the GIS targets in order to consider improved practices and additional resources if targets are not being met, and to respond to the growing challenge of climate change.
Thank you. Councillor Valenko?
I have nothing really to add. I think it's self-explanatory.
Thank you. Did anyone want to speak against the amendment? Councillor Sadler?
I apologise, I just have got a question of the administration. I just wanted to understand what the current timeframes were for review, because I understand that we do reviews and they do get brought back to council and then we do make adjustments. So I just want to make sure that I'm not, by resolution, changing an orderly program that we've already got.
Through the chair.
And if you can't answer that, but there will be a program and it will be orderly, that would actually also probably be enough information for me as well. Thank you.
Through the chair, I think the Director of Engineering Services emailed councillors this afternoon with a time frame, which included a review in 2027, if I'm corrected, a desktop review in 2027. And so my reading of this, it pretty much aligns with what Mr. Khan sent out earlier this afternoon.
Did anyone want to speak against the amendment? I'm going to put it to the vote. All in favour? That's unanimous, thank you. And that one is passed. So we go back to the substantive motion. Oh, I beg your pardon. Oh, have we seen yours?
Strap yourselves in. Yeah, still a few to go.
Oh, hang on. It's not in my bundle.
It's in everyone else's bundle.
I've dropped my bundle.
Where's it in my bundle?
While you're finding your bundle.
Yeah, go
do you
for
want
it,
me
go for it,
While the
please.
Mayor's finding her bundle.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I can get that.
My amendment is to the officer's recommendation, really correcting a typo that was discussed in the agenda forum. It's point number 4, paragraph 4, point E, II, and it's simply crossing out the word following and inserting streets mentioned in points A, B, C and D. It's just correcting that typo. Do I have... I'm chairing the meeting.
Oh, hang on, I did have them. Yes, Councillor Sadler, does anyone want to speak against? I'll put it to the vote. All in favour? That's unanimous. I see Councillor Thomas there. So, I have found them now. There's still, wow, there's more and more. Goodness me. I'm going to call them in this order. Councillor Heath, you do them in the order that's in front of me.
Has anybody else noticed the irony of all the paper being used in the green infrastructure strategy?
Right, Councillor Heath.
So you'd like me to read mine? I would like to add in a proposed new 4E3, which begins with instructs the Chief Executive Officer to arrange for planting of Norfolk Island pine trees during the 2025 autumn planting window in appropriate places on the verges along the selected distributor and entry statement roads, which was supported in the GIS survey, namely Broome, Marmion, Eric and Grant Streets. and the rationale, or do I wait for a
You'll
seconder?
need a seconder, and I'd just like to, before we move on, just ask a question. I haven't seen this until now. Can we get input from the administration on, on this, the implications, costs and resourcing?
Through the chair, I will hand most of this over to Mr. Khan, but I understand that when we discussed this with council, the view was that we wouldn't have the information available for the 25 autumn planting season to know exactly where we're planting these trees. But Mr. Khan, maybe you can expand.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. As through the chairs, I understand there is a view amongst a number of elected members that there is interest for Norfolk Island pine trees to continue to be planted this coming sort of autumn/winter season. And given the pathway that we're going to take for this green infrastructure strategy and all the plans and concepts that we need to develop, it is very unlikely that planting can occur. This in 2025 is more than likely 2026, and this is because normally, around January, February, sort of no later than March, is when our tree stocks are sort of arranged. If we try and purchase any Norfolk Island pine tree stock after this period, we might be left with those in a less superior quality, which means when they are planted, they will be unlikely to thrive. And for this reason, it leads to this councillor motion or amendment to sort of request or instruct the CEO to commence planting on streets such as Brew Marmin and Eric and Grant Street, where there appears to be strong support for Norfolk Island pines to continue. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm confused. I just want to know whether whether logistically we can meet this. That's my question. And are there ways logistically that we could meet this without having compromised stock? Can we take steps to ensure that the stock that we get is not compromised? Or could the motion be caveated to ensure that it isn't compromised stock?
Through the chair, should council accept this resolution this evening, we're in a position to order stock in early 2025.
I wonder, Councillor Heath, sorry?
I'm just wondering if I could ask a question as well.
Yeah.
If that's okay, through the chair. The motion says for the autumn planting window in appropriate places. Given that we're in the planning phase, are we going to know where the appropriate places on the verges are to plant in 25?
Through the chair, that's my understanding is that we will be in planning phase, and we could potentially be planting trees that after the plans are finalised, we find that they're in the wrong spot. That's the risk of jumping in and planting, particularly where maybe existing trees are that have failed, we are seeking advice from expertise in regards to the entire planting regime, and the last thing we obviously want to do is have sacrificial plants because we put them in where at a later date we found out was probably not the best location.
Yes, Councillor Bulbeck.
Yes, so my question is, would undertaking this planting mean that we wouldn't be planting other species, that we would be, because of the limited resources that the town has to dedicate to natural areas?
Through the chair, so the natural areas team we have a natural areas team and a parks team. So the parks team will be. Yes, yeah. So the parks team. So what would happen if council accept this resolution this evening? What would happen next is the parks team would then take this into consideration as part of the 2025 planting program. So it would rationalize the planting of Norfolk Island pines along these streets together with the planting of other species along the other streets.
You're saying there would be no fewer planting of other species as a result of planting these Norfolk Island pines. That's what I'm trying to establish.
Through the chair, so every year, we're probably in a position to plant about 200 trees, 200 to 300 trees each year, give or take. The Norfolk Island pines will be considered as part of these 200 to 300 trees, and any balance will be the other species. So there'll be an optimal balance between the two types of trees.
So are there any more questions on the motion? Councillor Heath?
No,
we're
still in questions.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So could we, I guess, and I did ask that this afternoon, but it was probably a bit late, could we do that within current budgets, I guess, is my question. From what you've just said, if there's about 200 trees and the optimal mix is, 10% or 20% are NIPS, that wouldn't impact budget, wouldn't need any budgetary considerations.
Through the chair, these numbers have already been accommodated as part of the annual budget, so it's just a matter of changing. It's just changing out the species at the time of ordering the trees. Thank you.
So no more questions. Thank you for that. Do we have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Harkins. Councillor Heath, you can speak to that now.
Great. The town of Cottesloe has consulted widely, and there seems to be support for the retention of Norfolk Island pines along the selected distributor and entry statement roads of Broome, Marmion, Eric and Grant Streets. These distributor and entry statement roads are iconic, and we should prioritise their appearance and maintenance. There is wide support to increase our tree canopy, so planting trees sooner than later is preferred. And I would be really disappointed if we missed another planting season without putting in some Norfolk Island pines as part of the mix next year. And I was really keen that we could order them in a timely fashion to get the good ones. The greening of Cottesloe has been considered by Council for some time, and it is appropriate that planting occurs now where possible alongside the planning with the external consultants that we'll be looking for with the GIS. Including this instruction now gives the administration time to source and order Norfolk Island pines. The Street Tree Master Plan is almost finalised, and the consultation that is referred to in the officer's recommendation talks about consultation with stakeholders directly impacted by the street species change. And so the Norfolk Island pines being retained on these listed streets, it appears is not going to be, the external consultant is not going to weigh in on that. It will occur. So I think we need to keep planning, but let's get some action and show the community that we value what they've said about the Norfolk Island pines and have some planted this year, in the next planting window.
Thank you, Councillor Heath. Councillor Harkins.
Thank you. I would echo the comments made by Councillor Heath. Members of the public do ask what's happening with the replanting of the Norfolk Island pines that either were planted and didn't thrive or have died and need to be replanted. And I think, as Councillor Heath has pointed out, we have settled on what streets are going to retain the Norfolk Island pines. From my understanding, the fungus has been sorted, or what's causing the deaths has been sorted. So I agree that it's time that we start planting them, that we don't miss another year. Anecdotally, just for example, there is a resident on Broome Street who fought against having to have a Norfolk pine in their front yard. They on the verge. One was planted. Unfortunately, it died, as many other species sometimes die. Well, they think happy days, I'm not getting one. So because it's been 2 years later, the round tyre thing's gone away and they think they won, they're not getting a replacement Norfolk pine. But on Broome Street, they will be getting one. There's a big verge that needs a tree there. So I absolutely endorse Councillor Heath's comments, and I think that we should start planting the Norfolk Island pines as soon as possible. Thank you.
Anyone want to speak against? Councillor Bulbeck?
obviously I'm fully in favour of trees, but this, having established that the Norfolk Island pines will be planted at the cost of planting other species, I'm unable to support this motion.
Councillor Mason?
I would like to speak for the amendment. I concur with Councillor Heath and Councillor Harkins, and I believe that there was strong support for not only Broome, Marmion, Eric and Grant, but I refer to the other streets that were supported, including Forest, Pearce, John and sections of Marine Parade. The community strongly supports the Cottesloe Norfolk Island pine, and I don't believe that prioritising native trees over Norfolk Island pines is in line with community expectations.
Anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Wilinko and then Councillor Sadler.
I'll speak against the motion because I think, for me, fundamentally, although I'm not against necessarily planting Norfolk Island pines, it sounds like we don't have the plan, and we might be planting them in the wrong place and wasting the money. So I don't see much point there. I understand that if it was the case that we were saying, for example, arrange for planting for those pines that are dying, so it's just exactly where the ones are that are dying, and they're, you know, but that's not what this says. It just says appropriate places, so it's quite vague. And what I've heard is we don't necessarily have a plan for where those appropriate places are, and we could be just wasting our money. So yes, it's another season, but it's only one more season in terms of the Norfolk Island pines. It sounds like there's a regular planting program underway anyway. That's not happening this year. Thanks.
Councillor Sadler.
Look, I would speak against, even though I really understand that people are wanting to have Norfolk Island pines planted on Broome and Marmion, and these are streets where they are highly valued. I would echo Councillor Wilinko's thoughts and just add that because we've got only so much money, what this motion is, or amendment is suggesting, is that we are going to, by dictating that we're going to plant plants on Broome Street, we're then going to be saying, actually, we're not going to be planting a plant on another street for somebody who may also be waiting for one. And I just don't think it's my job as an elected member to be playing judge and jury about where trees get planted. I want to stay right out of that. I'm really desperate for more trees to be planted. I'm satisfied that the community wants more Norfolk Island pines, but I would like the administration to make those decisions, and it is one more year and that is frustrating, but I'd rather put up with a little bit of frustration there and not meddle with which street gets a tree and which street doesn't, because I think I'm out of my area when I'm voting on that, so I sadly can't support it.
Anyone else wishing to speak? I'm going to put it to the vote. All in... Oh, no, it's an amendment. All in favour? That's Councillor Mason, Heath, Irvine and Harkins. And against? Councillor Thomas, Sadler, Wilinko, Young and Bulbeck. So that is... that motion is lost. Next one. Okay. Oh, well, I'm okay, you can go. Yes.
Thank you.
There's no shortage.
No, there's not. Just keeping on the theme of Norfolk pines, mine is that a new paragraph F for Fred be added to point 4 of the officer's recommendation as follows. Ensure that the Norfolk Island pines listed on any heritage register, local, state and national, and those on the selected distributor and entry statement roads which were supported in the GIS survey, namely Broome, Marmion, Eric and Grant, are specified as being retained in the street tree master plan.
And a seconder, Councillor Mason.
Thank you. So if you look at the officer's recommendation, there are many changes to street trees within the street tree master plan that are mentioned and noted in the officer's recommendation. However, there is very little discussion about the retention of the Norfolk Island pines. The retention of the Norfolk Island pines has implications for point 10, the long-term financial planning. Therefore, I think it's vital that they be included in the noting. And the above paragraph in red clearly identifies to ratepayers that we intend to retain the Norfolk Island pines in the district in the specified areas. We've discussed it at length, and it is in the officer's report, but a lot of ratepayers don't read the officer's report. They will pick out and read the final officer's recommendation. So we're mentioning all sorts of trees in here and in all sorts of streets, but not Norfolk Island pines. So all I'm doing is not dictating anything, just making sure that they are mentioned in this very lengthy officer's recommendation. And I urge you to support that inclusion. Thank you.
Councillor Mason?
Yes, I think it is a glaringly obvious gap if this is not mentioned and if these words aren't added. We're not creating anything new here. We are just paying note to these heritage registers, local, state and national. And I think it could be misconstrued by the community if there is no reference to the Norfolk Island pines being retained on those streets mentioned.
Thank you. Does anyone want to speak against the amendment? Councillor Bulbeck.
Just along the lines that I've been arguing for possibly up to a year now, that I believe that the Norfolk Island pine area that we should be protecting is the heritage precinct. So for that reason, I don't support it.
I'm going to put that to the vote. All in favour? That's Councillor Thomas and all other elected members other than Councillor Bulbeck. Councillor Bulbeck, are you going to vote against? Thank you. So that motion, that amendment is carried. And I think we have one more. Councillor Irvine. Is that 10? Oh, well.
Almost a record. My amendment is around paragraph 5 of the officer's recommendation. In the red, it just says would add in notes the new street tree species within adopted street tree master plan will only be planted and then an existing tree on site has been certified to no longer thrive by a suitably qualified arborist, with the arborist report to be circulated to elected members by the next briefing forum after removal. The reasons for removal of a tree shall be in accordance with the current street tree policy. The rationale for this...
we need a seconder.
Sorry? Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Mason?
Thank you. Rationale for this is, and thank you, CEO, for the unequivocal elaboration in the OCM agenda, page 30, healthy and thriving trees will not be replaced. However, my main concern is around the certification by a horticulturalist or an arborist, and I'm proposing that, similar to the street tree policy, which points out that for developer trees, an arborist should certify that the tree is viable and thriving 2 years after it's been planted. Similarly, I'd like to propose that an arborist should be certifying that a tree is failing to thrive. Horticulturalists specialise in plants, arborists specialise in tree care. I do understand that there would be extra cost in retaining an arborist to certify that trees are failing to thrive, but I feel that the discussions around the table tonight about the importance, the iconic heritage value of our NIPS in particular, deserve to be backed up by a suitably certified arborist report. Thank you.
Councillor Mason's the seconder, so did you have a question? Yeah?
Through the chair, if I can just ask, does this stop us from planting trees unless a tree is no longer thriving? So could this be read that the new tree species within any adopted tree will only be planted when an existing tree has been certified to no longer thrive? Would that stop us from then planting more trees because there isn't an existing tree that's not thriving? Because it says will only be planted when.
I think the intention is certainly not that it limit, and I can see perhaps it should after be planted to replace a failing tree.
There may be a problem, in fact, with the original will only occur when existing tree on site has been certified to no longer thrive.
Have you got
I'm
a
assuming
suggestion?
that the street tree master plan presumably contemplates more trees.
It does. So is there a suggestion of how that ambiguity could be resolved?
I think if it said will not be removed until it's been certified, that's
Yeah. Well, except it says new street tree species. It's the new street tree species we're talking about. Councillor Mason?
I seconded the motion, but I wonder if, through the chair, if Councillor Irvine would be happy to perhaps amend the notes to the new street tree species, and instead, because that is causing confusion, and now that I reread that, I can see that, so that sorry, I think I have the floor, and I have my microphone on. Sorry, Councillor Thomas. Perhaps if Councillor Irvine is happy to, because I think I understand the intention, is that it begins with a replacement tree is only planted when an existing tree has been certified to no longer thrive.
Yes, I'm happy for that
So to delete
change.
to delete notes at the new street tree species without any adopted street tree master plan. So delete that and start with a replacement tree will only be planted when an existing tree has been certified to no longer thrive, and continues on as per Councillor Irvine's original amendment.
I think consistent with the rest and the pattern of the rest of the officer's recommendation, the words notes that should also be included, because so notes that a replacement tree will only be planted.
Yep, I'm happy with that. Thank you.
Can I ask a question through the chair?
Can I, just before we go, I still think Councillor Wilinko's issue that he identified might be more clarified if it said will only be planted to replace a failing tree. So it's a replacement tree will only be planted to replace a failing tree, and that way it's very clear that we're only talking about that scenario, and it doesn't exclude the additional planting. So would Councillor Irvine, are you happy to have that added in?
I am, yep.
Yeah. So the amendment now reads, notes that a replacement tree will only be planted to replace a failing tree when an existing tree on site, etc., etc. So that's the new motion. So Councillor Irvine, have you spoken to this? I can't remember now.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah. And Councillor Mason, did you speak to it?
Now that it's confirmed, I would like to speak to why I seconded it. I think that it is important. Obviously, tree removal is the last thing that I think anybody wants, and I think it is important that we have a qualified arborist make that decision, and not I know we have some very qualified people on staff that do a wonderful job, but staff members with a horticulturalist certification is very different to a qualified arborist, and I think we owe that to our trees that we are removing.
Thank you. Councillor Harker, do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, because just to clarify through the chair, point 5 notes that the new street tree species. So is point 5 actually talking about changing the species rather than a tree dies and we replace it?
Through the chair, the GIS does suggest that some street trees do need to be replaced with other species.
Yes.
Take, for example, if a street tree is removed because of the shot-hole borer, it's unlikely we shouldn't be replacing it with a similar species. So it's whatever the GIS says in regards to that particular street, in regards to what, if there is a same or new species to be replaced.
Yeah, and so that's the nut of my question. I think we're on two different things here. I think point 5 talks about changing the species, doesn't it? Whereas Councillor Irvine's talking about a tree wherever, whatever street, if it's deemed to be dying, you want an arborist to decide that. Whereas I think point 5 is different, from my understanding, if I'm reading it correctly. Through the Chair.
Can I think that even if it was intended to deal just with when we're sort of swapping one tree for another, if Councillor Irvine and Councillor Mason are happy that this apply to all, it still captures the case that it was originally aimed at, so I think it can stand. So
just to clarify, so if there's the shot hole borers coming and DBIRD said that tree's got to come down, we don't then need an arborist to say that because DBIRD trumps an arborist. So
It's just a horticulturalist isn't deciding the fate.
Okay.
Through the chair, there are two different scenarios. If it's a shot hole borer infected tree, it has to be removed under state regulations. That would override council's resolution anyway. Likewise, if a tree posed a safety threat or a safety risk, that would have to be taken into consideration even if the tree was healthy, if it posed a safety risk because it was leaning over a fence or something that was deemed to be unsafe. This is purely if, my understanding of the intent of this is purely that if a tree is failing and it's certified by an arborist, then we would be able to remove that tree and replace it with whatever species was appropriate for that street under the GIS.
Yeah.
can we clarify the wording one more time, please?
Notes that a replacement tree will only be planted to replace a failing tree when an existing tree on site has been certified to no longer, has been certified by a suitably qualified arborist to be no longer thriving, with the arborist report to be circulated to elected members by the next briefing forum after removal. The reasons for removal of a tree shall be in accordance with the current street tree policy.
Sorry, so we've got rid of the word species within any adopted street tree.
Yep. Because this is broader, and it captures everything. Okay. Does everyone understand the amendment now? Councillor Irvine and Mason have spoken to it. Did anyone want to speak against? Councillors? I saw Councillor Sadler, then Councillor Wilinko, but if you feel that your points have been adequately made, let's move on. So we'll start with Councillor Sadler.
Look, I understand your desire to ensure that our tree canopy is maintained and thrives, and I think we have unanimity in that regard. But I think we're actually right outside our wheelhouse as elected members with this. I think that we're asking the administration, we're actually detailing the types of consultants down here, and I think that's actually not really our job. It's getting quite close to actually saying who we're going to employ as well. And then as well as that, as I say, I think in terms of the amount of work that we all get, actually requiring within a month for elected members to have the report coming to the next briefing forum. Our briefing forums are already chocker with strategic things, and I really want to make sure that we discuss strategic stuff at that meeting. I don't think, and they're already required to do things in accordance to the current street tree policy. That's how we run our organisation, by us creating policy, and then the administration follows it. And if there's exceptions, then it comes back. So I'm pretty concerned about how down in the detail we are, and I think that the resource that's been put there, it hasn't specified resource or not resource. I think we should, in terms of the administration's current plan, and I would prefer not to go right down to that detail. We haven't fully understood the budgetary implications of swapping from a horticulturist to an arborist, and that could be significant. And we haven't really determined ourselves. I'm not an expert to really go, is that going to make enough difference that that money couldn't be better spent on trees? So I think we should stay higher level rather than actually saying that we should have the resource spent in this way. I really strongly believe that, so I really encourage people, even though I understand that this comes from a good place, I encourage people not to support this amendment. Thank you.
Councillor Wilenko.
As with Councillor Sadler, I'm not supporting this, again, not because of the intention, but I think that the officer's recommendation adequately meets that. It talks about the existing tree on site has been certified to no longer thrive. So certified is a general term, I accept that. But to have to get an arborist report prepared for each tree that no longer thrives, aside from bringing it to the briefing forums, I just think the cost will be enormous. I don't know if we have an arborist on staff, but even if we do, they're going to spend all their time preparing reports on every single individual tree. It just seems a bit crazy to me. Thanks.
I just wanted to ask a question, Madam Mayor, through the chair, if Councillor Irvine would be happy to take that out, the arborist report to elected members by the next briefing forum. I think that that's what, it could be a sticking point for councillors, and I understand the workload for the administration. I don't think that is what was the crux of the amendment, and it was really just making sure that we have a qualified arborist. So I was just asking if Councillor Irvine, if you'd be happy to take that bit out, and perhaps that might change people's intentions.
I would, Councillor Mason, thank you for that, and probably through the chair ask the question about how many trees fail to thrive. So I think you gave in the briefing papers an estimate between $200 and $300 per arborist report. So what would be the budget implications for that?
Through the chair, we can only go in regards to past history. I don't know exact. Mr. Carr might be able to give an estimate of how many trees fail per annum, but that's looking backwards. It's not. It'd be a speculation to look forward in regards to whatever could happen in the future. So Mr. Carr might have an idea of what trees have failed in the past, or what sort of average.
Through the chair, in the past, my recollection is, and this is just very, very rough, we're probably looking at 4 to 5 trees, well, maybe 6, depending, 4 to 5, maybe 6 trees per annum that fail. But in saying that as well, council needs to be mindful of its tree population. Moving forward, every tree would eventually reach its end of life. So if you look at it from a long-term perspective, $300 per tree multiplied by your tree population would give you the long-term cost of an arborist providing a report. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Harkins.
Thank you. I am also going to speak against it, although the intent of having a qualified arborist I agree with if it's a very big Norfolk Pine or gum tree, chewit tree, whatever. But I'm worried that the wording, because notes a replacement tree. So what we can't replace, I understand what you're saying. You want an arborist to certify a tree before the replacement, but I just think the wording is not clear enough. And also it's too vague, a failing tree. Well, could that be one of those little ones in Broome Street that died by itself? I wouldn't want to spend $300 on a small little sapling to say, yes, that had to be removed. So for that reason, I won't be supporting it, but I perhaps it can come back another time with just strengthening it up a bit for big trees, etc. Thank you.
Anyone else want to speak to the motion? All in favour? That's Councillor Irvine and Councillor Mason. And against? That's all other elected members. Have you got that, Councillor? Ms Pilkington? So that one is lost. So let's go back to the substantive motion quite some time later.
Oh, I thought we were done.
I moved the substantive motion and I believe Councillor Belinko seconded it. I don't think we need to speak to it anymore whatsoever. I do want to say this is a really long officer's recommendation, and thank you very much to Mr. Can for putting that together. And I'm going to put to the vote the officer's recommendation as amended. All in favour? And that's passed unanimously.
Through the chair, given that we've had 11 amendments prior to the substantive, I'm just concerned about putting the rationale for the difference between the officer's recommendation and the final resolution. Would council be satisfied if the reason was simply that council amended the officer's recommendation to better reflect its intent in relation to the green infrastructure strategy?
I think that's exactly right. Well,
that's
that's
because
the
it might be a
rationale.
bit confusing if we put the rationale that's been provided by each councillor's
Well,
amendment.
you don't put the rationale for an amendment anyway. I think we don't. Okay, well, we're going back to the order of business. So, Station Street. Now, Councillor Sadler, I did see that you had an amendment put forward. Oh, that was called up. Thank you.
Absolute majority.
It needs an absolute majority. I'm going to move that from the chair. If there's a seconder, Councillor Sadler. Did anyone? I don't need to speak to that. Did anyone want to speak? Sorry, we're doing 10.1.2, which has been called up because it requires an absolute majority. So I've moved it from the chair and it was Councillor Sadler seconded. Does anyone want to speak against? If not, I'm going to put it to the vote. All in favour? That's unanimous. No. Oh. Okay. Is the discounted hire of... Well, okay, all in favour? Councillor Thomas, thank you. That's unanimous, noting that Councillor Harkins was absent. Fullbeck, beg your pardon. Thank you. Oh, you're there. Okay. Station Street, lots 35 and 50, 711 Station Street, page 19, and that again has quite a detailed recommendation for which the staff have been complimented. So I hope Mr. Druitt gets that. Give him a little thing of the live streaming.
He gets a gold star.
Yep. Councillor Sadler, you're moving an amendment, so I'll move this from the chair. Is there a seconder for the officer's recommendation on Station Street? A seconder. Thank you, Councillor Belinko. And I think, as I've said, great report. It contains what we want. I think it's a good reflection of our approach. So I commend it. I do know there's an amendment. We can deal with that in a moment. Councillor Belinko, did you want to?
No, that's fine, thanks.
Councillor Sadler, are you going to?
I'll move my amendment, and I do have one little question as well, but I'll move my amendment that the paragraph, which I'll read out below, is added to the resolution as a point 3, with the existing point 3 becoming point 4. And the point 3 that I want to add is notes that the draft Cottesloe Village Precinct Structure Plan and accompanying local planning scheme amendments are being brought to the December ordinary council meetings of the town of Cottesloe and Shire of Peppermint Grove for approval to advertise to the community. So if I have a seconder, then I will speak to that.
I can see Councillor Thomas's hand up there.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. So I think we as elected members at the town are very aware that this is coming to us in December, but I think it's really important to make it clear both to the community how soon it's coming, but also to the decision makers at state government, the WAPC, that we are having to decide that in a month's time, so they really do look and pay due consideration to that precinct structure plan as well. And I think it's also important to note, in light of some of the comments made in public statement and public question time today, that while the precinct structure plan has taken some time, the reasons for that are because there's been changes as we've gone on in what's been required by state government, and so further reports have been required to be obtained to make sure that we actually comply with the requirements of the new process, which is precinct structure planning. And also to note that we've actually engaged really well with the Shire of Peppermint Grove, but I think we're probably the first local government in Perth, and I'm not convinced of that, but I think it's likely that we're first local government in Perth, which has actually had to have a joint structure plan process across two local governments, because Cottesloe, of course, includes the Shire of Peppermint Grove, and we've had good engagement with them, but that actually does complicate the matter. It's required a lot more meetings, and also making sure that we actually have joint budgeting. So for those reasons, the process has taken a little bit longer, and I think that can also be drawn out as part of having this noting. So I'd be very appreciative of people just supporting that. But as I say, I do have one little other question. If this is adopted subsequently in terms of the question with regard to the Albion and its status. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sadler. Councillor Thomas, did you want to speak to that?
Nothing to add.
Thank you. Is anyone going to speak against this motion, the amendment? Yes, Councillor Valenco.
Well, not so much against as I've got a concern that whilst we may have some control over our own agenda, we don't necessarily have control over the Shire of Peppermint Grove's agenda. So to say that it will be coming to their December meeting, are being brought to the December ordinary meeting of meetings, I just don't know if we can guarantee that. I would ask whether the Councillor Sadler would be prepared just to delete the "and Shire of Peppermint Grove." Just because
I am prepared to delete that. I did run it by the administration and checked with Mr Nielsen that he was comfortable with that, but I guess it is outside of our control, and I get things which we're voting on should be within our control, so I'm not uncomfortable with it being
Could I
removed.
make a suggestion, please, because I think it's quite valuable to have that mention of Peppermint Grove, that it should perhaps read, is being brought to the December OCM at the town of Cottesloe and is expected to be brought to the December OCM of the Shire of Peppermint Grove.
Okay, it is being brought so I'll repeat that, is being brought to the December Ordinary Council meeting of the town of Cottesloe and
is expected to be brought to the December OCM of the Shire of Peppermint Grove.
OCM of the Shire of Peppermint Grove for approval to advertise to the community. I'm happy to incorporate that, and if my...
Councillor Thomas, yes, he's got his thumb up there. So now that is the amendment. Does anyone want to speak against this amendment? I'll put it to the vote. All in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you. And then moving to the substantive motion.
With respect, Mayor, I just had a query. I did look up with regard to the Albion to check whether it was on the State Heritage Register, and my understanding was that it was under consideration but wasn't on the register.
Yes.
But I want to absolutely clarify that, because I know that it is on our local register, but I had to look at it long and hard because I wanted to really make sure. So I would hate to have that wrong, because if it is on the state register, it would be lovely to be able to say that, but it did look like it was just noted but not on.
Yes, so if I've actually got the state register open in front of me, the Albion Hotel, Cottesloe, in brackets Halfway House. It's under Heritage Place number 601, and when you look at that, it is on the town's heritage or municipal register. However, according to the Heritage Council decisions and deliberations, The type of registration at the moment is RHP to be assessed, and that's current as of the 31st of March 2017. It hasn't been formally listed as a state heritage place. It is under assessment. It is, however, on the local municipal heritage register according to state heritage. Happy to share that link with councillors after the meeting.
No, thank you for that confirmation. It was quite confusing when you looked at it, so I understand the challenge when it's your first look at it.
Okay, the substantive motion, I'm going to put that to the vote. That incorporates Councillor Sadler's amendment. All in favour? That's passed unanimously. Thank you. The next item is 10.1.5, Seaview Golf Club, new entry and accessibility upgrades to Clubhouse. I have circulated an alternative motion on this item, which is substantially in the same terms as the officer's recommendation, but does include the wording at the end of the officer's recommendation, where it reads, is to be provided as part of. It will now read, each of the redevelopment options of the clubhouse and associated facilities to be considered by council, and the inclusion of a new paragraph 2 notes that the town is engaged in a process to determine the preferred option for redevelopment of the clubhouse, and that in accordance with the strategy approved by council in the April OCM, the golf club will have input into the redevelopment options via its representative on the redevelopment committee, and the golf club will be consulted on the preferred concept prior to broader community consultation and formal adoption by council. If I have a seconder, Councillor Thomas, thank you. So that is a substantive motion. The reason for the changes are to clarify that council is actually currently actively looking for a preferred option, so we're not just talking about a hypothetical project. And the additional paragraph 2 is to bring to the public and the club's attention details of the strategy to provide some indication on how the project will progress and their opportunities, particularly the club, for providing input and helping to drive the project. As for the officer's recommendation, the substantive terms, we have, of course, all read from Mr Edmondson regarding the need for universal access at the club, and I can't imagine that there would be anyone in Cottesloe that wouldn't want to see that. And that is actually part of what we're trying to achieve through the proposed redevelopment. Our objectives are to meet the needs of all club members and their guests, and that would include families like Mr Edmondson's. We also want to deliver a better amenity for all Cottesloe residents, including the 95% of our residents who are not members of the club, and we potentially want a source of income that could help with ongoing maintenance of the clubhouse. So I'm supporting the officer's recommendation because I really think that approving piecemeal work to the existing building is really very likely to end up being the first step in a really a business as usual approach to the clubhouse that will deliver for the needs of golfers and their guests, although I will say not really particularly well, but it certainly won't meet our broader objectives. And that isn't about putting financial considerations ahead of equitable access. It's really about not wasting the opportunity for a holistic redevelopment that will meet everyone's needs. When the previously proposed universal access works, which were partly funded by the town, didn't go ahead in 2017, the club wrote to the town and advised us that the possibility of a new clubhouse via the ACOM master plan meant that it did not make business sense to spend money on a project with no financial benefit. The clubhouse is actually closer to being redeveloped than it ever was, which would suggest that investment in the current building really does not make business sense at this stage. I'm not entirely sure that club members, when they approved expenditure on these works, was aware that there will be a redevelopment clause in the lease, and what impact that knowledge might have had on their decision. And likewise, since the AGM, where club members approved expenditure, we've obtained an independent property report which suggests that there may be matters of greater concern with that clubhouse than the lack of amenities and poor presentation. And it's not really clear to me whether members would have supported putting money into the building if they had been aware of the contents of that report, which in its initial form is available on the town's website. It is suggested that it's really none of the town's business what the club does with members' money. And I think to counter that, there are a few reasons why we should be concerned. The first is that the golf clubhouse and the golf course represent 50% of Cottesloe's public open space, with less than 5% of Cottesloe residents actually being members of the club. I would say what happens on that golf course and in that clubhouse is very much of interest to all Cottesloe community who we represent. The other thing is that we really want the club members to support a collaborative project to redevelop the clubhouse. And I think there is a natural tendency, it's quite well documented, the sunk cost fallacy, that where people have put their time and effort and money into a project, they're very reluctant to cut their losses. And I think what we could end up with is the members of the club disengaging from the process if they've spent a significant part of their funds on upgrading the existing clubhouse. I have canvassed this risk with the club's executive throughout our discussions. And as I've said, I think approving this is the first step to business as usual. It's highly likely that it would be. Finally, club members have often told me that they would be happy for their funds to be spent on a redevelopment project if it delivers a better clubhouse. I haven't really met any members who haven't supported that idea when it's been explained to them. And I think piecemeal and likely sacrificial upgrades to that building are going to leave less money for those members to decide to invest in a holistic and collaborative approach. It is their money, but I think members will be very happy to invest in this project when they know that it is likely to go ahead and that the lease will have a redevelopment clause and that the property is not in excellent condition. I am also concerned about cost blowouts and the implications that that will have on the amount of members' funds that would be available for a collaborative investment with us. The club got quotes for the universal access works in 2017, and we all know construction costs have gone up a lot since then, estimated at around 40%. The club is now proposing to do more work than were covered by those quotes. That's the universal access work and some cosmetic improvement for the same 2017 price, which I think is not likely to be realistic. Members have approved $220,000 for the works, and it's not clear what will happen if the works come in at greater than that amount that's been approved, but it does raise the possibility that members will be asked to sink even more of their pot of money into works that will be potentially sacrificed with the redevelopment. And I think if you look at how much costs have gone up, it looks like it is likely to be closer to $300,000. I'm sure members will be happy to put that into a redevelopment that will deliver a better outcome for all users. The final comment is on timeframe. The club's architect's report supporting the DA suggests the timeframe for redevelopment is 5 to 10 years plus, and I presume that is on the advice of the club's management. And as we all know, we're currently working through a process to determine the right approach to the redevelopment, whether it be refurbishing the existing clubhouse, refurbishing and expanding the existing clubhouse, or a bowl-over and rebuild option. The time frame is almost certainly going to depend on the approach that we take, and it could well be significant that the time frame that the club has indicated, certainly on its DA. So for all those reasons, I think it is our interest what happens to the clubhouse. We want club members to collaborate with us and not then be put off a collaborative approach, and we end up fighting with the club members because they've gone ahead and spent a very significant amount of their funds on the existing building. So for those reasons, I would urge you to support the alternative motion that I have put, as I've said, substantially in the same form as the officer's recommendation. Councillor Thomas, did you want to speak to that?
Yes, I will briefly. So I do believe we have the common intent between the town and the club that we want a safe and accessible club that delivers benefits to all the community. And I really hope that we can establish a collaborative relationship through the redevelopment committee to deliver that best outcome for the community and the club. And I do think that the motion put forward is the best step to doing that.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Did anyone want to speak against the alternative motion? I'll put it to the vote. All in favour? That's unanimous, thank you. So we've done the green infrastructure. Healthy Streets Project, 10.1.7 on page 36. With the officer's recommendation on page 44. Do I have a mover? Healthy Streets, Councillor Thomas, and a seconder, Councillor Sadler. Councillor Thomas, do you want to speak to the...
Yes, thank you. So thanks very much to the administration for getting this together. I think it's well acknowledged in the town that we want to create a safe environment for all the community and our kids, and that Broome and Marmion Street in particular have become or can become rat runs. I know the strong support from the community, with 86% of Australians living on those streets in favour of the concept plan, and I think the town's done very good work to deliver, a concept that will deliver those safety and accessibility and street crossing improvements and minimise the cost of the town. So in a good plan forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Sadler?
Thank you very much. I'd just like to echo Councillor Thomas's words, but also just to say that I really appreciate the administration taking on board a little bit of the feedback from councillors with regard to articulating back to both Main Roads and to the consultants who are going to be doing the detailed design, the principles of no additional cost being incurred to council, and also just making it seem very high level so that there can be that detailed design is something different from a concept design. And it can be changes made which can achieve the outcome that's desired, but will actually then not result in additional costs to the council and therefore to ratepayers. And I also just want to highlight that one of the reasons why I'm really supportive of this project is because we are continuing to push for our foreshore master plan to be rolled out, and that's going to be something which then entertains a very low speed area in the main area, and we've already recently supported 40 kilometres an hour all the way along Marine Parade, and that consequences of that will be that cars are more likely to want to drive along Broome Street and Marmion Street, which is going to worsen things which people already find challenging, particularly on Broome Street. So we really want to make sure that we don't have adverse consequences for our residents on those streets by virtue of improving things for people on Marine Parade and visitors to Marine Parade. So I think this is part of a holistic approach to getting it right to create a really nice residential atmosphere. So for all those reasons, I would support, urge our fellow elected members to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, I have an amendment.
Councillor Harkins.
I have an amendment.
Yeah.
Oh, would you like me to put it?
Yeah.
Okay,
Please.
sorry. So I have an amendment, and it is in paragraph 3B, conduct a speed survey for Broome Street, and I'm inserting for a 12-month period from December 24, striking out April 25, so it'll be December 24 to December 25.
Seconder? Councillor Sadler? Councillor Harkins?
Oh, thank you. So currently the administration have in their records a speed and numerical vehicle count that they undertook for 2.5 weeks in September, October of 23. So they only have that data, and they're advocating doing it from December to April, from December 24 to April 25. I think it's important to gauge the speeds in Broome Street throughout the year, because the speeds do vary according to the season and the congestion in Marine Parade. As Councillor Sadler just said, Marine Parade does have a big impact on Broome because, for example, when Scroppers by the Sea, it's at deadlock, they zoom through to Broome. Or if the Marine Parade is shut for a concert, they'll come through to Broome, or in various times. So it does change throughout the year, so I do think it's important to gauge what's going on in Broome Street for a 12-month period before we submit the request to Main Roads WA, so we have full data. I don't think going to Main Roads with 2.5 weeks of data, or even adding on 6 months, is sufficient. I do think we need to point out 12 months worth of data, because surely that will help us. If there is merit in dropping the speed to 40 kilometres an hour, I think that will help us with our argument to Main Roads. The administration have advised that we can do this with our own counting devices, and if something crops up during that 12-month period where we need to take speeds on another road, we can get a consultant to do that. But if we made this the priority for the 12-month period, we would have some good data. So I would urge you to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sadler.
I just really want to hear what Councillor Harkins had to say, but I actually would speak.
Turn your microphone on.
Even though I'm speaking against. So I just second it, but I really wanted to hear what you had to say. But I actually think if we repeat data, in the future, and we do it for the same time from December to April, that would be adequate in terms of a comparative point of view. We have been recommended by the administration to look at the busiest time, which is the December to April, which I think will give us the best data. And I do know that Main Roads has now got a policy that they will actually lower this posted speed in any area upon request, in any residential area, to 40 kilometres an hour on request by local governments. That's quite a recent change. And I know that City of Vincent is actually going to be lowering their posted speed on residential streets throughout the entire suburb. So I figure we don't need to argue the case to them, but I think we do need to have some data, and I'm comfortable with the amount of data that the administration is proposing we get, and then that does leave the speed assessing gadgets available to be used at other parts of the town when needed. So for that reason, I was really interested, but for that reason I'm speaking against. Thank you.
Does anyone want to speak to the motion? I will speak to the motion. I was very comfortable with getting a 12-month snapshot because as much as, I'm really keen on sorting out the issues with Broome Street, before we start changing the speed, I mean, the Healthy Streets work will change it, but that is, that is a bigger project than just a straightforward change of speed. And I think we should have data so that we can justify what we're doing when neighbouring streets that might be impacted complain potentially. I'd like to be able to point to empirical data that there was definitely an issue with speed, with traffic speed for an extended period during the year. So I do support having more data, and I will note that a survey from December 24 to April 25 could be as little as 3 months and as much as 5 months of information, depending on when in December it starts and when in April it finishes. And I would much prefer to have a longer period. Councillor Wilinko?
Well, I was just wondering if I could ask through the chair, the administration. So we've just heard from Councillor Sadler that in fact it sounds like we don't need any particular data. We can just make a request. But is that your understanding, or is there a minimum amount of data that's required that MWR needs?
My understanding is the City of Vincent just last week spoke to the Wagga Zone about what they're doing. We haven't received anything directly, but Mr. Khan might be able to advise in regards to any information from Main Roads.
Through the chair, we haven't received information from Main Roads as such, but based on what has recently been deliberated by Council with regards to Marine Parade, I think there will be some data that needs to be provided. In our view, we believe we have sufficient data to provide to Main Roads should Council wish for the administration to look at speeds and consider speed reductions. And on the same token, I suppose more data that we have makes our case stronger as well. Yeah.
Sorry, just to follow up. So when you say we have sufficient, you mean with the officer's recommendation of going from December to April, we would have sufficient?
Through the chair, it is in our view that that being the peak season would provide enough data to make a case to Main Roads.
I'll just do a follow-up question.
Yeah.
I'll just do a follow-up question. So I note that on point C22 of your officer's recommendation, it would be coming back to a elected members workshop. So am I right in that the data is not just for Main Roads, it's for elected members?
Through the chair, before anything goes to Main Roads, there needs to be a council resolution for this to go to Main Roads. So yes, it needs to come back to elected members before we can make a submission. So it's through a council resolution that a submission is made.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to speak to the amendment? I will put the amendment to the vote. All in favour? That's Councillor Irvine, Harkins, Bulbeck, Mason and Mayor Young and Councillor Thomas. Against? That's Councillor Wilinko, Sadler and Heath. So the amendment is passed. Thank you. And then back to the substantive motion, which was moved by Councillor Thomas and seconded by Councillor Sadler. I think that's correct. I think we can go. Oh, Councillor Mason. Yes.
I'd like to speak against the substantive motion. I'm actually not sure what we're doing here. The Healthy Streets program was sold to the community as a zero-cost initiative to the town by MRWA. I understand we're making a 100K budget amendment which may be refunded or may not. I note the objective is for costs to be entirely funded by MRWA, but that can't be said with any degree of certainty, and that council may need to contribute towards lighting, drainage and minor footpath connections, and there is a long-term maintenance cost of $55,000 per year for ratepayers. And all of this is based on a recent survey of 74 people, of which 48 were supportive. This is extremely low. I think an average survey gets 200 responses. And when it's something the community really cares about, like the skate park, we can get around 400. I think the community has spoken by not responding. Like it or not, the majority of residents drive their cars, and the majority of residents using these main arterial streets multiple times per day are not speeding. I understand we may have an issue around Broome and John Street, and I definitely support asking the administration to investigate speeding in this isolated area, but to add road treatments along a major part of Broome and Marmion Street is just going to cause frustration across a broad section of our community, and I think it will actually have adverse flow-on effects like rat running on quieter residential streets, and even potentially push more traffic onto Marine Parade, which we don't want. I cross Broome Street with young children on most days, and I used to live on Marmion and do the daily walk to Daisies without an issue. I think to change our iconic tree-lined boulevard to an avenue of speed bumps based on feedback from 48 residents, and to incur large costs to ratepayers seems inappropriate. We quibble about the extra cost of
Point of
querying.
clarification, actually, there's no suggestion of incurring large costs to ratepayers, so I am allowed to make, if something is factually incorrect, one can actually, it's a point of order.
It's all right. It's just if something factually inaccurate is...
I've already talked about the large costs. We could potentially be up to lighting, drainage and minor footpath connections, and I consider a maintenance cost of $55,000 a year a significant cost, so I don't actually think it's factually incorrect.
I think I accept that.
There is a point of order around the point.
Are you calling another point of order?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
The two elected members on the ATWG.
Excuse me. Councillor Mason, please, that is almost adverse reflection.
Excuse me, I'm trying to use my 3 minutes and I've been interrupted by people that don't want to hear my view.
Councillor Mason,
Okay, I'll be
people
quiet.
can call points of order. I don't know if Councillor Thomas is calling a point of order. If a point of order is called, all
I respect,
elected
Madam Mayor, I
members-
apologise.
Thank you. Were you calling a point of order, Councillor Thomas?
I was,
Well, you have to tell me what the point of order is.
yes. It was just in relation to the point that there was uncertainty whether the budget amendment would be repaid. So that was clarified in the agenda forum that it was a bookkeeping matter and that the funding would be received before the consultant's report proceeded.
Thank you, and we can pick that up at the end. Please continue, Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I used quotation marks when I first referenced the objective was words that are used in the officer's recommendation. The objective is for costs to be entirely funded. But I will just finish where I may. So I was about to sum up and say that I believe that it is a large cost to ratepayers, and that we quibble over the extra cost of caring for our beloved NIPs, which a broad section of the community support, but want to spend dollars on unnecessary road treatments supported by less than 1% of the community. Where are our priorities? I think the broader community will ask why we are doing this to them, who travel on these main arterial roads multiple times a day. The broader community will ask Why are we doing this? And are we prioritising ideology over common sense? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Look, I will ask the CEO just to clarify the point about the 100,000 because I think that does need to be clarified.
Through the chair, as per point 2 of the officer's recommendation, the recommendation is to approve a $100,000 budget amendment, which is both the expenditure in regards to the design costs as well as the income or the revenue received from Main Roads to cover that cost. So there is net zero cost to council in regards to that $100,000.
May I please clarify my costs? I mentioned it was
Councillor
lighting,
Mason.
drainage and minor footpath
No,
connections.
it was, that was a point of order, and I ruled that you
Councillor
had
Thomas.
not factually, it wasn't factually incorrect what you had said, but I was just clarifying that 100,000. So I think that's what we need at the moment. Is there anyone else wants to speak on the motion? Councillor Irvine?
Yeah, it's more just through the chair. Given the cost issue raised, is there any sort of annual estimate, given the maintenance costs and what it would cost for drainage and lighting in terms of a forecast on an annual basis going forward, how significant those costs are? And the other question I have is, do we have an estimate as to the time the works will take and the disruption on those roads, given the low turnout on the survey?
Through the chair, the costs are discussed in the resource implications of the item on page 44. We don't necessarily know what the drainage, lighting and footpath connections will be until we have a design. It's hard to estimate those. Again, on the basis that we are trying to look at designs that are low cost in regards to drainage, etc. That's one of the intention. We have done a very rough estimate in regards to the annual maintenance cost or the asset management cost over the next 80 years, given that potentially it's a $4.4 million investment. And that's $55,000 a year, which has already been discussed. In regards to timing, Mr. Khan is probably better able to provide a response to that.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Through the chair, as I understand, council, that there is appetite amongst elected members for this project to be delivered over 3 years. This considers Main Roads affordability in funding the project. So essentially, the plan is for Broome Street to be funded not in 25, 26, 26, 27, and Marmion Street to be done the following financial year being 2027/2028. So essentially, in summary, Broome Street will be done across 2 financial years after this, and Marmion Street, the next one, after the first 2 financial years after Broome Street is completed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Then summarise the answer, just so I'm clear. So we have no clue about what the drainage or lighting costs, even in an estimated basis, going forward, but we do know the maintenance costs at this stage, in summary. Thank you.
Is that a question or a statement?
If it's not correct, then it's a statement.
Well, you
or
can
a
ask
question.
a question,
Yeah,
but you can't
yeah.
make a statement.
Okay,
so-
well, I'll ask a question.
Yeah.
Is that correct as a summary? We don't have a clue or a forecast based on, preliminary designs as to what the costs will be.
Through the chair, the preliminary costings are based on the actual treatment that we know Main Roads will fund, which is the on-road treatment. We haven't gone into the detailed design, so therefore we don't necessarily know the true cost of any non-road based treatment, unless Mr. Khan can provide a better explanation.
Through the chair, what Mr. Scott says is accurate. So until a detailed design is done, we won't know the exact cost. But if council were to refer to its preliminary cost section of the officer's report, you have elements of the road treatment cost, the drainage cost, and the preliminary and planning design cost. So that's broken down into the three aspects. So with regards to drainage, in the concept that we're putting forward, we're looking at approximately $170,000 in drainage costs for Broome Street. And on Marmion Street, the drainage cost is approximately $58,000. Again, these are very, very high level cost estimates, as mentioned by our CEO. We will have to go into detailed design to try and work out the exact cost. In saying that as well, the officer's recommendation, is based on the principles that there should be zero cost to council. So as part of our detailed design process, we will be looking at different initiatives, different possibilities to minimize drainage, and we will continue negotiating with Main Roads on these drainage costs, should there be any drainage costs required to deliver this project. Thank you.
Through the chair, if I could just add that at the moment, we're only asking for a budget variation of $100,000 to deal with the detailed design. Then, once we have the detailed design, we can then do a more accurate costing, which will then be brought back to council for further consideration. It's not a case of necessarily the officer's recommendation, if resolved, which will mean that the project just automatically goes ahead.
I was just about to ask, paragraph 3C2, I'm reading that to say that it will be brought back for consideration in the 25-26 budget, by which time we will have the details. And at this stage, there is no expenditure to be incurred by the town. Is that correct? Yep, thanks. Yes, Councillor Heath.
Yes, I actually just had a question that if we were committing to the $100,000, we are going to have a chance to have another look at it, but I'm not sure if 3C actually explains that, because it says on completion of the detailed design, it says we're going to finalise the construction funding arrangements with Main Roads, and I'd wonder if we could have a step in there, and I could think of an amendment to, because based on my meeting at the zone meeting the other night and hearing from the City of Vincent, where they have to, it did not cost them anything to post a speed limit of 40 kilometres throughout their local roads, and their streets, they didn't have to have expensive infrastructure put on their streets, and they got cars slowing down, and maybe...
sorry?
It cost them $400,000.
In signage, sorry.
Yes.
In signage. Yeah, sorry. Yes, but I think we need to investigate that option, and I just would like that to be put in this pathway ahead, because I don't want anything to preclude considering other things. So I would like to put that amendment through.
What amendment?
Upon completing of the detailed design, number one, bring the item to an elected member workshop to canvass all options to make safe speeds along Broome and Marmion Street.
I'm uncertain about whether you can bring that amendment to this resolution, which is dealing with the Healthy Streets program. It's because it's not consistent with the intent, which is to deal with the healthy streets. It might be that you could bring that by a councillor motion at a subsequent meeting, when it's not, and that then defines the scope that we can discuss then. But if introducing, peripheral concepts when this is about healthy streets is problematic.
Okay, I understand. And okay, so perhaps I'll just can request when it comes to the elected member workshop.
Or you could bring a councillor motion if you felt very strongly about it for, to ensure that, or you could bring it to a briefing forum and we can discuss it.
Yeah, I think
there.
I'd like to request it comes to a briefing forum.
Well, look, I'm not keen on making any amendment.
I won't be making any amendments then.
Councillor Harkins.
Can I ask a question through the chair to Mr. Khan? Following on from Councillor Heath's comment, Main Roads give us $100,000, we'll pay the $100,000 to get the detailed design done. It comes back to us. Are we then allowed to say no? If we've spent their $100,000 on the detailed design, can we say thanks but no thanks?
Through the chair, yes. Council it is in council's right to say no to that, because at this point in time, construction funding has not been applied for. So council, after detailed design, can choose not to proceed with construction.
Just to clarify there, paragraph C, upon the completion of the detailed design, finalise the construction funding arrangements with Main Roads, and you've just said that we wouldn't have finalised them. So I would just like to be sure that that finalising the construction funding arrangements with Main Roads WA did not tie us in necessarily. My question is, what is the impact of finalising the construction funding arrangements with Main Roads WA?
Through the chair, so upon completion of the detailed design, there will be a P90 or construction cost estimate that would fall out of that process. So it will be a heavily detailed item. So essentially, it's a bill of quantities that we will put out to tender. We will then take that bill of quantities and approach Main Roads, and for some reason, should drainage still be required, we'll be going through the process with Main Roads to understand what they are prepared to fund and what they're not prepared to fund. And upon completing that, receiving that feedback from Main Roads, this matter will then be brought to an elected members workshop to discuss discuss cost implications with council, and then council can decide whether or not it wishes to proceed.
Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Irvine. Sorry, and then
Just through the chair, a note on page 42 says, on the basis that MRWA have agreed in principle to fund the detailed design 2024-25 to approve a $100,000 budget amendment. So in principle, could the CEO or Mr. Khan direct me to where that's stated in writing in the correspondence that are in the attachments? If I've missed it, I do apologise, but I don't see any in principle agreement in writing from MRWA to in principally fund that $100,000.
Through the chair, so if council were to refer to the correspondence between myself and Main Roads, proposing that four-year structure, detailed design being 24-25, in Main Roads' response, Main Roads have given us in writing that they agree to fund the detailed design in 24-25. So it's the very first line in Main Roads' response back to the town.
The amount is not stated in that correspondence as I'm looking at it now.
Through the chair, until we go out to quotes, $100,000 is just a token sum for the administration thinks that would deliver the detailed design.
Thank you.
I'm just, Mr. Khan. Oh, sorry, Councillor Wilinko. I'll let you go first. Oh, yeah.
Look, I think I'm going to speak against this motion because, in reflection, looking at the report, aside from concerns about the lack of public consultation, sorry, I'm speaking right now. Aside from the lack of public consultation, there seems to be also a concern here that I can see with the road treatments actually not doing a whole hell of a lot. For example, Broome Street, okay, between Napier and Forest says significant improvement in all 7 highlighted parameters. Great, so let's do that bit. But between Napier Street and Eric Street, no improvement. Between Eric Street and Grant Street, some improvement because of raised treatment at Eric Street. Well, there's already treatment at Eric Street. Between Marmion Street, some improvement between Napier and Forest. Between Napier Street and Eric Street, some improvement, and between Eric Street and Grant Street, no improvement. So I'm not really clear why we're spending either our money on drainage and lighting or our money as taxpayers at the state level for no improvement or just some improvement. I fail to see how this is such a great idea. Thanks.
Thank you. My question was going to be to Mr. Can. If we approve a budget amendment of 100,000 to accept Main Roads funding that covers the entire cost, how can we modify that paragraph to ensure that no money above that, to ensure that we're not out of pocket at all for the detailed design? Is there a way that we could amend paragraph 2 to ensure that we're not out of budget on the detailed design?
Through the Chair, if I can provide some advice first. The budget approval is effectively to authorise the expenditure, and it's difficult to say you can't go over, councils regularly, routinely go over and under its budget provisions. However, if we've got a commitment from Main Roads saying that they will fund the detailed design, and as been pointed out, they haven't actually put a dollar value to that, then if it ends up costing 95,000, we get 95,000 from Main Roads. If it costs 105,000, we get 105,000. We can put wording to, if you like, at the end of point 2, to the effect that there is no cost to council in the detailed design process. But there's a difference between unauthorised expenditure versus an over or under budget. And the budget amendment is effectively under the Act to authorise the expenditure.
Thank you. Look, I understand that. I'm just wanting to ensure that if the detailed design comes in at 105 and Main Road says no, we're sticking to 95.
So through the Chair, our normal procurement process would be to get quotes. Once we get a quote from, and we would obviously consider the quotes, in this case, given the value, we'd have to get at least 3 written quotes to do the detailed design, and then that's a trigger point to say whether or not the quote is within the budget allowance, and obviously we'd share that information, I'm sure, with Main Roads, and then get a written commitment from Main Roads to fund that amount. Obviously, that would then hopefully bind the consultant who's doing the detailed design to a set fee. Obviously, there's a potential for a variation. Any variation would have to also be considered by both us and Main Roads to ensure that it didn't impact on the funding. The whole intent of this is not to have no cost to council.
Okay. Right. Are there any, Councillor Harkins?
Yeah, I'd like to speak in favour of the officer's recommendation. So I feel comfortable that we are not going to spend any more money on the detailed design, as we've just heard. Point 3A1 says that there's to be no cost incurred by council for the entire project. Yes, there may be maintenance costs for the next 85 years, but that will be applicable to the road in general anyway. I feel comfortable that, as we've heard, that we can say no. If it comes back and they can't do anything about the drainage, then we can say no to it. I attended as an observer the workshop, the Healthy Streets workshop. There were very passionate people. People were sitting in separate tables. There was a Broome Street table, a Marmion Street table, etc., etc. The people living on those streets felt very passionately about creating a healthy street. So, we ran that workshop to hear from the community, and the passions were very strong. They felt, as we've heard from various speakers, that Broome and Marmion the traffic needs to be slowed down in some way. So I think let's investigate it. If it comes back and it's all too expensive, we can say no. But I think it would be a shame to let it die and that we do nothing. So let's explore it and go to the next step and then see what we can do. Thank you.
I will speak in favour of the officer's recommendation and just reflect back on the background where we were invited. I think we were one of 2 local governments invited to take part in a pilot project which was aimed at Main Roads had identified those 2 streets as streets that would benefit greatly from the application of Healthy Streets treatments, and it was a project that was going to not cost Cottesloe ratepayers any money. We have embarked on the project. We've got to a point. I think we do have to think about the credibility of local governments. If we are invited to take part and we've spent this amount of time and we've done all the workshops and whatever, and then we say, oh no, I think you've really got to wonder about our credibility with the state agency, that actually we are better served having a good and respectful relationship with. I think knocking this project back at this stage is not going to do the town of Cottesloe any favours at all. So I'm very keen to take it to the next step. Does anyone else want to speak on the motion? Councillor Irvine.
I concur with you. It's not great that we get this far and then we have councillors voting against it. I'd like to see in this motion a guarantee that we will get that money back. It's not an in principle agreement that before we if we do approve this, that we don't go ahead with spending the money unless we've got in writing back from them that they will fund that 100%. That's just my comments.
Councillor Thomas?
Yeah, I'd just like to point out, Councillor Irvine, point number 2 states approve a budget amendment. Approve a budget amendment of $100,000 to accept the MRWA funding that covers the entire cost for the detailed design. So, yeah.
Okay. Look, I'm just thinking about you're the mover, so you can address those in your. You're the mover of the substantive motion. You can address that in your summing up at the end. Would be the yeah.
But it's just a question whether he thinks that.
Yeah, I think that can be addressed, and I think the CEO's addressed it. Are there any other speakers for or against the substantive motion? Councillor Thomas, do you want to sum up?
Yes, thank you. So, I suppose the first point is, this project has gone through extensive consultation, and I really commend the town on the effort that they have gone to run the workshops and numerous surveys, and each of those points has demonstrated very strong support from the community, which is backed up by comments through other forums. The second point is that the treatments are quite commonplace and in fact already exist at a number of locations in the town, such as Railway Street and near the Cod Village precinct. And if travelling at safe speeds have minimal impact to people using their cars travelling on the streets, but to provide great safety improvement to pedestrians and other vulnerable road users. And I think ultimately we need to consider the safety impact to those users. I think just to address the point Councillor Walenko made, there was commentary from the consultants, from the review, that some of these treatments don't do enough. And I suppose I would say that, well, let's do more. Sure, I'd be very happy to do more. But, I suppose if you say we could either do more nothing is actually going in the opposite direction to what that consultant review was suggesting. My view is the motion will not expose the town to any additional cost. I think it's quite clear that the design will proceed once we have received the funding from MRWA. So I would, strongly urge the town to support this project, which I think the community has repeatedly demonstrated strong support for, and will deliver really strong benefits. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. So I'll put the substantive motion to the vote. All in favour? That is Councillor Heath, Sadler, Harkins, Mayor Young and Councillor Bulbeck. Against? Councillor Irvine, Wilinko and Mason. So the motion is passed. So the next item on the agenda is 10.1.8, the establishment of the CEO Recruitment Advisory Committee on page 46, with the officer's recommendation on page 48. Do I have a mover? Councillor Heath. And a seconder? Councillor Wilinko. Is anyone proposing to speak against the motion? Anyone speaking against? I'll put it to the vote. All in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. And the next items have been, the CEO has suggested or recommended that they be considered in a closed meeting. The items involve personal details of nominees, a contract which the town may enter into, and the CEO recruitment consultant.
And a contract that may be entered into.
And a contract that may be entered into. Yes, thank you.
Do we have to do
Yes.
the minutes?
Oh.
That was involved.
No.
Oh, that was on block? Okay.
Yeah, yep. So I move that we close the meeting to... Okay, thanks. That we... I move that we close the meeting so that we can consider these items. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Wilinko. All in favour? All in favour of closing the meeting? Yep, thank you. So noting that Councillor Bulbeck and Sadler are not in the room, that was unanimous otherwise. So... Thank you. Just now, we've come out from behind closed doors, and I'm going to read the resolutions that were passed by council while we were in a closed meeting. That Council 1 awards the 2025 Community Citizen of the Year Award to nominee B. 2 awards the 2025 Senior Community Citizen of the Year Award to nominee C. And the selected nominee be embargoed until the official awarding of the honour. And awards the 2025 Award for Active Citizenship to nominee E, and the selected nominee be embargoed until the official awarding of the honour. I might just point out that in my reading out of the first paragraph, I omitted that last bit, which actually was part of the resolution. So all 3 of those nominations are embargoed until the official awarding of the honour. Paragraph 4 endorses the CEO undertaking community consultation in quarter 2 of 2025 to consider the future date of the summer citizenship ceremony and Australia Day event. And 5 endorses the unbudgeted grant revenue received being accounted for in the mid-year budget review process. The next item is in respect of item 13.1.2, and the resolution is, excuse me, that Council authorises the Chief Executive Officer to award the supply and laying of asphalt and road profiling tender to tenderer B mentioned in the officer recommendation in brief section and sign the contract. 2, authorises the Chief Executive Officer or their delegate to manage the supply and laying of asphalt and road profiling contract, including provision of possible variations, provided the variation is necessary in order for the goods or services to be supplied, does not change the general scope of the contract. Has that gone off? Yes. No, because it's still... Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's just the screen has gone off. Okay, thank you. And is managed within the allotted budget allocation. And 3, authorise the Mayor, elected members and the town's administration to disclose the identity of the successful tenderer. And I'm going to ask Mr Can to disclose that now, please.
Through the chair, that would be Rhodes 2000. Thank you, Mayor Young.
Thank you, Mr Can. And then the final item 13.1.3, CEO recruitment consultant. The resolution is that Council appoint Bilby to assist in the recruitment of a new Chief Executive Officer in accordance with their attached request for quote submission. That being the end of the meeting, I declare the meeting closed at 9:40 p.m. Thank you very much, elected members.